Although the light warrior possessed the light attribute, he was ultimately an undead creature formed by the soul of a powerful soul. It was completely restrained by the purification light. Therefore, even with the power of his domain, it was difficult for him to rush out of the purification light's corrosion in a short period of time, given that he had suffered serious injuries previously. Kai, the members of the Light of Dawn monster hunters subconsciously exclaimed at this moment. At this point in the battle, Kai had consecutively used the Death Extermination 5th of the 7 ultimate. But now, she still had no intention of stopping at all. A gray path suddenly extended out from under her body. When the path appeared, she had already floated to the ground. At least on the surface, Kai did not seem any different from before, as if she was not affected at all. But everyone knew that the Death Extermination 7th ultimate had reached such a level, and the backlash she had to endure was terrifying. Just as the Light Warrior expended a large amount of spiritual power to counteract the corrosion of the Death Extermination, the trail of gray light had already connected to his feet. In the next instant Kai moved. She was like a gray butterfly, pouncing towards the light fire rising from the Light Warrior's body. Like a moth flying into a flame? No, of course not. Right now, Kai had completely entered a special state. The Death Scythe launched an attack at an astonishing speed. Under the illumination of the crystal-clear gray light blade, the Light Warrior's flickering soul fire in his eye sockets was already filled with fear. The Death Extermination 7th Ultimate, 1st Ultimate, Death's Death, 2nd Ultimate, Death's Cleansing, 3rd Ultimate, Death's Howl, 4th Ultimate, Death Extermination. The 5 Ultimate connected and bloomed under the leadership of that stunning figure. 5 combined into 1, 5 Ultimate burst forth. That was the power of the Death Extermination that could not be evaded. It was an unparalleled journey of death. This was the Death Extermination 7th Ultimate, the 6th Ultimate Path of Death. 5 combined into 1, forming the power of the 6th Ultimate. The Death Extermination 1st Ultimate, the Death Extermination. The Light Warrior barely managed to block it with his heavy sword, but when the 2nd Ultimate arrived, his heavy sword was already covered in cracks, and his entire body was once again enveloped in the light of purification. The Death's Howl burst forth, and his body stiffened. Death's Kiss and Death Extermination intertwined. Kai-Er's figure had already appeared behind the Light Warrior. The gray and white light slowly converged, and a faint halo flickered. Kai stood there quietly. Both hands were gripping the slender handle of the Death Scythe. She appeared to be very quiet. The gray light on her body was also dissipating at an astonishing speed. But she still stood straight, without the slightest feeling of weakness. Puff! The solidified golden light instantly turned into powder, and a dense golden light instantly drew an arc, circling in front of Kai-Er, and entered the eternal melody at her chest. Success. Yes, she succeeded. Relying on the power of the Death Extermination 7th Ultimate, she forcefully defeated the 2 rank 9 Holy Guards. The fusion domain of light and darkness separated in front of the Death Extermination. The powerful power of light and darkness dissipated in the purification. Yes, the Saint of Reincarnation, Kai-Er, succeeded. She almost forcibly passed the test of the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity with her own strength. At this moment, she looked far less miserable than her companions in the previous floors. But at this time, the heavily injured Chen Ying-Er and Wang Yuanyuan couldn't help but have tears in their eyes. They didn't know what kind of backlash Kai-Er would suffer after using the Death Extermination 6th Ultimate. But the horror of this backlash would probably last for a very, very long time. Kai-Er stood there quietly, but in the next moment her body suddenly trembled. Just at the position of her chest, layers of halos rapidly spread outwards. First it was red, then blue, green, yellow, black, gold, and so on. The 6-colored halos flickered alternately, covering Kai-Er's delicate body with a layer of dazzling brilliance. And with the flickering of this 6-colored radiance, the entire sixth floor of the Tower of Eternity lit up. The six-colored halos surged, and an unprecedented dazzling brilliance appeared in the Tower of Eternity just like that. It was a dazzling light, an indescribable brilliance. All the light came from the eternal melody from Kai-Er's chest. Her body trembled slightly, and Kai-Er swayed slightly. In the next moment, the six-colored radiance on her body became even more intense. Using the Death Extermination Sixth Ultimate had drained all the power in her body. If it wasn't for the evolution of the spiritual stove of samsara due to the previous fusion, then she would only be a walking corpse at this time. She could use the first Death Extermination without suffering any backlash, but after using the other 5, all the backlash would affect her body. Humans had 6 senses, and once all 6 senses disappeared, it would be no different from death. At this moment, among the 6 senses of Kai-Er, there was only one left, and that was feeling. Sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch had all disappeared. All that was left was feeling. However, at this moment, she, who was already extremely weak and couldn't even lift a finger, was surprised to find that a magical power was spreading with her chest as the center, and then drawing the huge energy around her to condense in her body at an astonishing speed. A warm feeling spread throughout her body, and the endless weakness disappeared in an instant. The spiritual power in her body was recovering at an astonishing speed. Moreover, this magical power was even resisting the backlash of her spiritual stove of samsara. In other words, the level of this power was already comparable to the spiritual stove of samsara after the fusion. Yes, this was the power from the Tower of Eternity, the power from the divine law of necromancy, calamity necromancy, Electrolux. The 6-colored halos were becoming more and more intense, and Kai-Er was the center of this light. Her dull skin regained its luster. Kai-Er was even surprised to find that her lost senses were actually recovering. She wasn't the only one who had the same feeling. Although she was the core of the 6-colored light and was receiving the most direct nourishment. Her companions in the distance, including Long Houchen who was on the ground, were also receiving the baptism of the 6-colored light. Everyone who was seriously injured was recovering at an astonishing speed. Even Zhang Fangfang and Wang Yuanyuan's life force was consumed at the same rate. This 6-colored light was too magical, and none of the known forbidden healing spells could compare to it. It was an extremely pure elemental power. At this moment, everyone felt as if the fire god, water god, wind god, earth god, light god, and darkness god had all descended. Moreover, they were working together to release their divine powers to heal everyone's injuries. Gradually, a hint of understanding appeared in Kai-Er's heart. That's right, the test that they had gone through previously was so difficult, and they had to rely on their own strength to pass everything. The eternal melody didn't provide them with any help. In fact, some of them had almost died in the process of passing the test. However, this was still a test, not a battle of life and death. No matter how evil the holy law of necromancer, calamity necromancer Electrolux was, the ability he left in the Tower of Eternity was to choose an inheritor for himself, to inherit his powerful strength, and not to destroy. Therefore, after everyone passed the test on the 6th floor, it seemed as if all the tests had been completed. The Tower of Eternity sent down this powerful 6-elemental light to help them heal their injuries and recover their vitality. Electrolux wouldn't want a disciple who was covered in pain, or even had injuries that couldn't be healed. The first to recover were Lin Xian, Han Yu, Yang Wenjiao, and Duan Yi, who had provided all of their spiritual power to cut. All of their spiritual power had been absorbed by Kai-Er, and even some of their vitality had been injured. However, in less than 10 minutes, everything had returned to normal, and their spiritual power was even stronger than its original peak state. This was an improvement after incessantly stimulating one's potential in battle. Next was Chen Inger. Her face gradually became flushed, and with Yang Wenjiao's help, she was able to sit up, and the vitality that she had consumed was slowly recovering under the power of the six elemental light. An hour later, she was pleasantly surprised to find that she had recovered to her original state. Strangely enough, as long as she had fully recovered, the six-colored light would avoid her body and not allow her to merge with it. At this time, the extent of the other people's injuries could be seen. Sima Xian, Wang Yuanyuan, and Zhang Fangfang were bathed in the six-colored light for a full hour, and it was still continuing. It was the same for Kai in the distance. The six-colored radiance seemed to be endless as it continued to shine. After another hour, Zhang Fangfang and Wang Yuanyuan opened their eyes at the same time, and their eyes were filled with joy. Their vitality had been completely restored to normal. It wasn't that Wang Yuanyuan's injury wasn't as serious as Sima Xian's. In fact, she had already sacrificed her life at that time, and she was supposed to die. But at that time, Zhang Fangfang was equivalent to sharing the backlash, and gave her half of his vitality. This was borne by the two of them. After sharing, naturally, their injuries weren't as serious as Sima Xian's. Sima Xian's recovery lasted for nearly 8 hours before it was completed. When he touched his big bald head and stood up from the ground, everyone couldn't help but cheer. That was the feeling of happiness after suffering. Their hard work and efforts had been rewarded at this moment. The more serious the injury, the more they would gain in the Tower of Eternity assessment. For example, Sima Xian's current internal spiritual energy had been directly promoted to the level of level 7 and 8, and was getting closer and closer to level 8. Wang Yuanyuan and Zhang Fangfang's internal spiritual energy had also been promoted to level 7 and 8, but their original cultivation was higher than Sima Xian's, so the degree of improvement wasn't as big as Sima Xian's. The others also more or less improved a lot. Their cheers didn't last long before they returned to silence again, because the six-colored light didn't disappear because of their recovery. The halo was still there, but this time it was only concentrated on Long Haochen and Kai. It was strange to say that Long Haochen was clearly dead, but the six-colored light still continued to flow into his body, and the same was true for Kai. The two of them had now become the two cores of this six-colored halo. "Boss won't be resurrected just like that?" Lin Xian said with a face full of hope. Han Yu silently shook his head. The possibility is very low. After all, Boss is already dead. Look, the wound on Boss' chest doesn't show any signs of healing. Demon Emperor's power is too terrifying. Even the wound can't heal, not to mention resurrection. Looks like we still have to go to the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. I don't know what the 7th floor is. Kai has already passed the 6th floor test, but why isn't there a passage to the 7th floor? Chen Ning said doubtfully. Zhang Fangfang said, now we can only wait. When this six-colored light ends, perhaps the passage will naturally appear. Wang Yuanyuan said with some worry, I hope it's faster. Boss can only last for 7 days, and resurrection should still take time. We've already used up 2 days. Only 5 days left. Sima Xian said, it's all right. There's still 5 days, they won't be absorbing the recovery light here for that long, right? Time passed minute by minute. 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours, 19 hours, 24 hours. When the six-colored radiance lasted for a full 24 hours, the members of the Bright Glimmer of Dawn Demon Hunt Squad started to get anxious. If this continued, how long would the six-colored light last? However, it was also because of this that they couldn't help but secretly admire Kai. After their bodies fully recovered, the six-colored light no longer entered. Not to mention the dead Long Haochen, Kai was definitely still alive when the battle ended. But after bathing in the six-colored light for a full 24 hours, she still hadn't fully recovered. It was clear how terrifying the backlash of using the 7 absolutes of death was. Just as everyone was getting more and more worried, the six-colored light in the air suddenly became faint, until it slowly dissipated. Kai also opened her eyes along with the disappearance of the six-colored radiance. Kai, Everyone immediately ran towards her excitedly. Sima Xian ran at the front with Long Haochen's corpse in his arms and reached Kai Er's side in a few steps. Chen Inger grabbed one of Kai Er's arms and carefully looked at her face. How is it? Care, the backlash of your 7 absolutes of death. Kai Er's pretty face revealed a trace of a smile. I didn't expect that my backlash would actually disappear. It seems to have been offset by the ability of this Tower of Eternity. That's great. Chen Inger immediately shouted in surprise. They all knew that using the 6th of the 7 absolutes of death, the backlash that Kai Er suffered was likely to last for a few years. It was even possible that she would never recover in some aspect. Just as everyone was immersed in excitement, suddenly, the light on Kai Er's chest lit up again. This time, it was no longer a 6-colored light, but a brilliant golden light. From the front of Kai Er's chest, the eternal melody in the form of a skull came out with a whoosh. The necklace that was connected to the pendant also turned into a flash of golden light and disappeared. The golden skull slowly rose and floated above Kai Er's head. Its small eye sockets suddenly lit up. 2 clusters of small but exceptionally bright golden flames quietly danced. Suddenly, 2 rays of golden light shot out from the eye sockets, like 2 golden needles piercing the end of the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity. Wherever the golden light passed, the originally somewhat hazy 6th floor was completely illuminated. At the end of the 6th floor, there was still a statue of Electrolux. This statue's entire body was golden, with only the location of the heart being black. From where the members of the Bright Glimmer of Dawn Demon Hunt Squad stood, that smear of black was like a rising black flame. A body of light, but with a dark heart of death. Perhaps this was the true portrayal of the undead catastrophe Electrolux. Compared to Electrolux's statue on the 5th floor, this statue seemed to have a sorrowful charm to it. The golden light that shot out from the eye sockets of the Eternal Melody's golden skull was injected into the eye sockets of this Electrolux statue. Suddenly, a strong golden flame rose and burned. The entire 6th floor was completely ignited. Starting from the outermost layer, a strong golden flame rose from the pillars, and the aura of death that had been purified by the power of death of Kai Er suddenly became stronger. In the thick aura of death, it was as if there were thousands of ghosts howling in grief. But in such a sound, there was an unparalleled strong aura of light elements. At this moment, the concentration of light elements on the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity was even higher than when they saw the Sun-Moon Divine Snail in the dark swamp crypt. However, although the light elements were huge and rich, they were full of a domineering and ferocious feeling, and there was not the slightest trace of the peace of the Sun-Moon Divine Snail. Pairs of giant pillars were ignited, and the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity was illuminated. A strong golden halo spread in the air. The aura of light also became stronger and stronger. It gave Kai Er and the others the feeling that their bodies were immersed in a lake composed of light elements. Including Sima Xian, there were 5 people who possessed the light attribute. However, they did not dare to absorb the power of these elements in such a rich light element situation. The aura of death in these light elements made them unconsciously produce a strong sense of repulsion. Only Kai Er looked normal. As the favored of the death god, any aura of death and vengeful spirits would naturally dissipate as soon as it approached her body. An old voice suddenly sounded from all directions. It was a tremor that came from the soul. Even if Kai Er had lost all her 6 senses, she could still hear the meaning conveyed by this voice. Welcome to the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity. Being able to come here proves that your strength is enough to accept my inheritance. Climb the stairs of the path to heaven. I am waiting for you on the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. As long as you can come before me, then, you will be my disciple. Otherwise, you and I are not fated. There was no emotion in the old voice. If Long Haochen was still alive, then he would definitely hear that this voice was exactly the same as the one he heard when he first entered the Tower of Eternity. The only difference was that this voice was a little less cordial and a little more cold. Chapter 230. Scourge Electrolux's message was only this simple sentence. As soon as it finished, the statue at the end of the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity actually moved. The one that moved was its right arm. As it moved slowly, the staff in its right hand was raised high, pointing towards the dome. In the next moment, the entire 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity turned into a golden color. The light of dawn monster hunters could only see this golden light in front of them. The dazzling light forced them to close their eyes. The light elements that felt like liquid a moment ago seemed to have become solid in an instant, making them unable to move at all. This intense golden light did not last too long. When the light faded, everyone's vision was restored. The entire 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity had completely changed. Their surroundings were pitch black. The original 6th floor had long since disappeared. Everyone's surroundings had become a night sky. Countless bright stars shone around them. At this time, although they felt like they were standing on the ground, if they only looked with their eyes, it would be like they were floating in the night sky. Under the illumination of the stars, this was the first time they experienced that strange feeling. And not far in front of them, a golden door that was 10 meters tall appeared there. The door was double opened, and at this time, it was tightly shut. On this door, there were no gorgeous carvings or decorations, only that deep golden color. They could not see what was behind the light door. The arched golden door emitted light that was filled with the aura of death. A golden light fell from the top of Kai-Er's head. She subconsciously raised her hand to catch the golden light. It was eternal melody. However, at this time, eternal melody was no longer a simple skull. At the end of the skull, there was a key-like metal strip drilled out. A strange feeling appeared in Kai-Er's mind. She faintly felt that everything that they had experienced before was actually preparation for opening the door in front of them. Every time they defeated a holy guard, not only would they receive the holy guard's recognition and help, but at the same time, they would also inject the soul of the strong into eternal melody. When the 12 holy guards were completely absorbed by eternal melody, then, on the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity, it would ignite the dormant consciousness belonging to the undead calamity Electrolux. That was why this golden door had appeared. The eternal melody was the key to open this door. What was the path to heaven? Kai didn't know, but she already had no way out. She turned around and looked at her energetic companions. Biting her lower lip, she said, "I will definitely revive Haochen." "Definitely," everyone said in unison. Wang Yuanyuan took the long Haochen from Sima Xian and helped Kai carry the long Haochen on her back with Chen Ying, secure with a chain. When Kai walked towards the golden door with the eternal melody in her hand, everyone tensed up at the same time. In fact, he was even more nervous than he was during the previous test. Before they reached their goal, they had been working hard towards it. But now that the goal was right in front of them, they became even more nervous. Whether they could revive Long Haochen depended on this one move. This was their only chance, and also their last chance. They had risked their lives to come here. Whether they could succeed or not was too important to them. Kai's eyes were not perplexed or perturbed. There was only stubbornness and focus. In her heart there was only one thought, and that was to revive Long Haochen. She had to succeed. If Long Haochen could not be revived, then she could only accompany him to another world to build their family. At this time, Kai could not care about the overall situation of humanity. She only had Long Haochen in her heart. If the people she loved the most were dead, what was the point of her living? He was like the sky to her. The moment he died, her sky would collapse. The golden door was full of majesty and solemnity. When Kai came in front of it, the eternal melody key in her hand suddenly emitted a scorching heat. Kai raised her hand, and the golden key flew out, disappearing into the golden door of light. Immediately, a surging and solid golden halo spread out from the door of light, illuminating the starry night sky with a flickering golden light. Without a sound, the two golden doors slowly opened. The members of the Glimmer of Light monster hunters watched with bated breath. At this moment they were extremely nervous. Whether Long Houchen could survive or not depended on this move. Their eyes burned as they stared at the slowly opening door. What exactly was behind it? Soon they saw it. The path to heaven was really a path. To be more precise, it was a staircase. In the starry night sky, behind the huge golden door of light was a golden staircase that led to higher and deeper into the night sky. The staircase extended upwards at a 45-degree angle. It was a steep slope, and the height of the steps was even. There was also a thick golden light. This was the path to heaven that led to the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. It really was spreading higher into the sky. However, there was no end to this path to heaven. Yes, it seemed to be endless. Kowtow with every step, the path to heaven leads to heaven. A majestic voice rippled out from the golden door of light and into everyone's ears. Kowtow with every step? Everyone was shocked. But at this moment, Kyre walked into the door of light with Long Houchen on her back. She knelt in front of the first step and kowtowed. As proud as she was willing to abandon her pride for the sake of her lover. As long as she could save Long Houchen, Kyre felt that everything was worth it. The members of the Glimmer of Light monster hunters had unknowingly gathered outside the door of light. Although the golden door of light was open, there was a strong resistance that kept them outside. Only Kyre and the dead Long Houchen on her back could enter. After the first kowtow, Kyre climbed up the first step, knelt again, and kowtowed. Long Houchen, who was on her back, swayed gently. Lin Xian asked Sima Xian doubtfully, "Will there be strong pressure on this path to heaven?" Sima Xian nodded and said, "It's possible. This should also be a test." At this point, he was suddenly shocked and murmured, "We have already defeated the 12 holy guards and passed the test of the first 6 floors. This path to heaven can't be a test of the 7th floor, right?" Hearing his words, everyone's expression changed. They had seen how difficult the test of the 6th floor was. If there was a test of the 7th floor, they were afraid that Kyre would not be able to withstand it. Wang Yuanyuan said in a low voice, "It shouldn't be a test of strength, right? The test we passed before was already difficult enough. If there was a more difficult test, we would still need to accept Electrolux's inheritance. I think even if this is a test, it should be in other aspects. It shouldn't be a test of cultivation." Everyone outside the light door made their own guesses, but only Kyre, who was inside, knew the real situation. On this endless path to heaven, there was no pressure, and the pressure would not increase as she moved forward. However, the moment she stepped into the light door, her internal and external spiritual power disappeared. Kyre did not even know what kind of magic this path to heaven contained, to be able to make her cultivation disappear without a trace. At this moment, she was no longer the reincarnation saintess. Instead, she was just an ordinary girl. At most, her physique was slightly better than her peers. Long Houchen was not light, and when her cultivation was still there, Kyre did not feel anything while carrying him. But now, she had no internal and external spiritual power. Long Houchen on her back gave her a heavy feeling. Kowtowing with each step, Kyre only climbed a dozen steps before her speed slowed down. Sweat had already begun to appear on her forehead. Her legs and waist were already a little sore. Kyre understood that if she did not follow Electrolux's message, then all the previous efforts would be in vain. However, she carried Long Houchen on her back, kowtowing with each step, and how far could she go without the support of spiritual power? If it was someone else, they might have already had a sense of gain and loss in their heart, and even wanted to retreat. But in Kyre's heart, there was only stubbornness. The path to heaven in front of her was bound to become more and more difficult, but she would not retreat. There was only one thought in her mind: either die on this path to heaven, or bring Long Houchen to the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. Under the influence of such a belief, there was not a little negative emotion in her heart. The more difficult the situation was, the more stubborn her heart was. Kowtowing with each step, Kyra never looked back once. In her eyes, there was only the stairs to go up. Her pace was very stable, taking a step, kneeling down, kowtowing, and getting up. Another step, kneeling down again, the cycle repeated. When Kyra stepped on the 20th step, the people outside the light door had already seen her difficulty at this time. Was this path to heaven really pressurized? Otherwise, with Kyra's cultivation, how could her speed begin to slow down in such a short time? However, if there was pressure, she should use spiritual power to resist. But Kyra's body did not release any spiritual power at all. There was no further discussion, because discussion would not get the truth, and Kyra was already on the path to heaven. She could only keep moving forward. Kyra, come on. Wang Yuanyuan clenched her fist. Right now, they could only wish Kyra well and cheer for her in their hearts. When Kyra reached the 30th step, her whole body was already sore, especially her knees, as if there were thousands of steel needles poking them. Sweat had already soaked through her clothes. Kowtowing 30 times in a row had already consumed most of her energy. If she wasn't carrying Long Houchen, this situation would only happen after she reached at least the 200th step. It would even reduce the impact as she slowed down. But now, Kyra was carrying Long Houchen, who weighed more than 160 kilograms on her back. Her own weight was less than 100 kilograms. Under this kind of overloading situation, the burden on her body was really too heavy. However, Kyra did not stop. The pain in her body did not affect her determined heart in the slightest. Kowtowing with each step, she moved forward slowly but firmly. 35, 36, 37, 42, 43, 44, you guys, what is that? The sharp-eyed Chen Inger suddenly shouted. Everyone looked in the direction of her finger, only to see that on the glittering and translucent golden step, there were 2 faint red marks. The red was very faint. If one did not look carefully, they would not notice it. There's more. Chen Inger shouted again. As Kyra climbed another step, another 2 faint red marks appeared on the higher step. Han Yu's fists were clenched tightly in front of his chest. Even with his strength, his voice was actually trembling. Kyra's knees are scraped. That's right, that light red mark was blood, Kyra's blood. After climbing more than 40 steps, carrying Long Houchen who weighed more than 160 kilograms, her long skirt was already worn out, and the blood from the scrapes on her knees was left on the steps, which was why there were those marks. Everyone's heart could not help but tighten for Kyra. Although they did not know what kind of pain Kyra had to endure on this path to heaven, from the current situation, they could tell that it was definitely not an ordinary path. Although this path to heaven had deprived her of all spiritual power, it could not shake her willpower. Since young, Kyra's willpower had far exceeded that of ordinary people. Moreover, she was now trying to resurrect her man. Step by step, she kowtowed with each step. 2 bloody marks began to appear on the endless path to heaven, from shallow to deep. When she climbed up to the 57th step, the number of bloody marks increased from 2 to 3. The 3rd bloody mark came from Kyra's forehead. Chen Inger had already thrown herself into Yang Wenjiao's arms, and could not bear to look, she cried bitterly. Everyone else subconsciously closed their eyes. Their bodies and bodies were trembling violently. Kyra was really too strong. Kyra did not stop, it was as if she could not feel the pain. 50, 60, 70, 80. Step by step, she struggled to climb up. Her body had already begun to sway, and the bloody marks on the ground began to appear. Liquid blood flowed down the step. But she still continued to climb, and continued to climb. Somehow, there seemed to be an unparalleled force supporting her body, which was becoming weaker and weaker. Bang! On the 112th step, Kyra suddenly fell down fiercely, heavily smashing onto the step in front of her. However, her right hand firmly grabbed onto the surface of the step, and the tip of her foot touched the step below, not letting herself slide down. Blood stained the hem of her long skirt, and slid down the tips of her feet. Kai's originally beautiful face was now full of bloodstains. Because her body had endured too much, it was trembling violently, but her eyes were still stubborn and determined. Panting violently, she forced herself to move up another step. Bang! She kowtowed again. But this time, she could not get up. Her vision turned black, and she directly fell into a coma. Kai! Everyone outside the light door shouted in unison. Wang Yuanyuan could not help but use her body to hit the barrier of the light door, but she was directly bounced off. Not to mention Chen Yinger, even the men like Sima Xian, Lin Xian, and Han Yu could not bear to watch anymore. The 3 bloody marks, like 3 sharp swords, stabbed fiercely into their hearts. But now they could do nothing. They could not enter the light door, and naturally, they could not help Kai. They could only watch helplessly from here, looking at the bright red blood marks on the golden step. There was no change on the path to heaven, everything was the same. There was no end to the golden steps. 2 hours passed. Kai's body suddenly moved slightly. She supported her body with her arms and slowly lifted herself up. She was awake. Without turning back, she only paused for a moment, struggled to get up, took a step forward, and kowtowed again. In just a moment, the blood marks reappeared on the new step. Kai's. Chen Yinger and Wang Yuanyuan were already in tears. Their voices were already hoarse from crying. The men's eyes were already red, and they clenched their fists so tightly that their nails had already pierced into their palms. How they wished to be able to step on the path to heaven, and replace Kai. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps. After waking up, Kai was still as strong as ever. Long Haochen, who was on her back, was now like a heavy mountain to her, but he was all that she had entrusted in her heart. Life never stops, and progress never stops. Either I die on the path to heaven, or I save my man. In Kai's heart, she kept repeating this sentence. This time, she advanced 28 steps, and when she fell again, she immediately fell into a coma. But even so, when she fell, she still clung to the steps in front of her, not letting herself slide down. Climbing, passing out, climbing again, passing out again. Kai fell over and over again, and by the time she reached the 200th step, she was already covered in blood. By this time, she had already passed out on the path to heaven for the 7th time. Chen Yinger had already passed out from crying, and the others were madly attacking the barrier of the light door. Only by doing so, could they vent the pain and torment in their hearts at this time. Kai's knees no longer had a complete layer of flesh, and her white bones were directly exposed. Her fair and slender legs were unconsciously convulsing at this time. Because of the excessive blood loss, her whole body appeared morbidly pale. Her life was flowing out of her at an alarming rate, but the path to heaven was still not at the end. This time, Kai was in a coma for a very long time. She only woke up again after a whole 14 hours. Kai. The members of the Light of Dawn bombarded the barrier in front of them frantically, shouting at the top of their lungs. They really could not stand it anymore. They wanted so badly to tell her not to continue. The torture of the flight of steps from the 6th to the 7th level was far greater than the previous test. However, Kai did not turn around. She raised her head slightly, and only a blood-red color could be seen in her eyes. She struggled to move her body, but realized that she could not get up no matter how hard she tried. After passing out 7 times, she had already exhausted all her strength. Her life was coming to an end. It was also at this moment that a huge light door suddenly appeared in front of the 10-step. Golden light flashed, and the door of light slowly opened, faintly revealing the golden world behind it. Door. Kai's grayish-white eyes suddenly lit up the moment she saw the door. Hope. Hope is right in front of me. She had arrived, and so had the members of the Light of Dawn monster hunters. They subconsciously quieted down. Looking at the door of light that had appeared higher up, they gritted their teeth in pain. Kai could no longer feel her legs, but at this moment, her eyes became incomparably bright. carrying Long Houchen on her back. She desperately used her arms to drag herself and Long Houchen up a step, and her forehead forcefully knocked against the step. Deep blood marks were left on the step, and the golden path to heaven was even emitting a faint red light because of the blood she left behind. However, Kyra did not care about all this. The door was right in front of her, and hope was right in front of her. I will definitely bring Long Houchen through this door of light and resurrect him. She did not know why, but Kyra faintly felt that there seemed to be a choked voice echoing in her ears, as though it was crying and complaining. However, all of this was not important to her. Apart from moving forward, how could she think about anything else? Her body's potential was stimulated by the word hope, and just like that, she climbed up day by day using her own arms. At least 2/3 of the area of each step was dyed red by the blood on her body. However, the blood stains were getting fainter and fainter. Was her blood about to run dry? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Finally, the door of light was within reach, and Kyra's determined and persistent face finally revealed a trace of a smile. She raised her hand, and the bones on her already worn fingertips were faintly visible. She trembled as she grabbed at the door of light. However, at this moment, a scene that almost drove the members of the Light of Dawn monster hunters crazy appeared. The door of light suddenly shook slightly, and it went up a step, causing Kyra's grab to miss. Despair appeared in the eyes of everyone outside the door of light. Was the door on the staircase actually fake? In a frenzy, they hysterically attacked the door in front of them. They cursed the holy law of necromancy and calamity necromancer Electroluck. Kyra was just a child. Why did he have to be so cruel? Kyra was the only one who didn't despair. Her gaze was still resolute. Her empty hand landed on the empty flight of stairs. Her body once again moved upwards. This was her last chance. She knew that if she fainted again, she might not wake up for a long time. Resurrecting Long Houchen was her last chance. Her faith and persistence burned like a flame in that instant. Kyra suddenly used all her strength and pushed at the staircase in a frenzy. A miracle unfolded at this moment. Kyra, who had already exhausted all of her strength and was about to reach the end of her life, actually relied on her frail arms to forcefully push her body forward, bringing Long Houchen along with her as she suddenly rushed forward. She did a movement that was almost like a carp jumping up. With this leap, her right hand finally reached into the door of light. But this time, she had exhausted all of her potential. The moment her palm reached into the door of light, Kyra's eyes widened, but she had completely lost her spirit. Just as her right hand touched the door of light suddenly emitted a golden light. The light enveloped the bodies of Kyra and Long Houchen. With a whoosh, they were sucked into the door and disappeared. With the disappearance of Kyra and Long Houchen, the path to heaven in the sky and the platform where the glimmer of dawn monster hunters were on became illusory. The light was distorted and refracted. In the next moment, it had returned to the original appearance of the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity. However, Kyra and Long Houchen still disappeared. Everyone who had fallen into a state of hysteria because of Kyra's tragic situation was panting violently. At the same time, a thought appeared in their minds. Kyra succeeded. The golden light lingered, and Kyra, who was carrying Long Houchen on her back, appeared in a golden world, surrounded by endless golden light. In the air, a subtle blood-colored mist floated and surrounded Kyra's body. Accompanied by a little bit of golden light, it quietly entered her body. Even the blood on her clothes also turned into a blood mist in the golden light, and then quietly integrated into her body. Kyra's right hand was still stretched forward, but she tightly hugged Long Houchen's leg that was wrapped around her waist, as if she was afraid that his body would fall off. The wounds on Kyra's body were quietly recovering, and all the stains were also decomposed and disappeared in the golden light. Only the torn dress could not be recovered. The look on her face was still persistent. Even if she had lost all her spirit, that determination never changed. In the golden world, a faint sigh sounded and an old voice echoed. Is it worth it? The golden light gradually subsided, and Kyre, who was carrying Long Houchen on her back, lay on the ground. She had a dream. She dreamt that she and Long Houchen seemed to have returned to the time when they participated in the monster hunter's trial in the sacred city. Hand in hand, they walked along the road leading back to the hotel, walking. This road suddenly became endless, and they could not walk to the hotel no matter how much they walked. But they did not feel annoyed at all. Instead, they enjoyed the warmth of holding hands. The sound of the green bamboo cane hitting the ground echoed in Kyre's world. Every time she turned her head to look at Long Houchen, she would always see that loving and gentle smile. Their lives also seemed to merge at this moment. All the pain had been forgotten at this moment. Let's go on like this, forever. However, many things often did not change according to people's will. The road ahead became blank and illusory, and the next moment, it was surrounded by a golden light. Kyre was a little panicked. She grasped Long Houchen's hand tightly and yelled, Houchen! Waking up, she suddenly turned over and sat up. When Kyre looked down, she saw the pale hands of Long Houchen entangled on her chest. She quickly clenched them. The pain in her body had indeed completely disappeared, and even all the internal and external spiritual power had been completely restored. The pain she had experienced still left a lot of memories on her body. The hem of her long skirt had long been torn. Because of that painful memory, her body trembled unconsciously. As her memory recovered, Kyre remembered what she had done before, and she could not help but look up. This should be the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. As far as the eye could see, everything was golden. Compared with the first 6 floors of the Tower of Eternity, the area here was much smaller. The circular hall was about 30 meters in diameter. The dome was arched. There were a total of 12 golden pillars surrounding it. Whether it was the ground, the dome, or those pillars, there were countless fine golden magic patterns. The entire hall floor was a huge golden hexagram. There was a faint golden mist rising. In the center of this hexagram, there was a huge coffin, 5 meters long and 3 meters wide. This golden coffin was inlaid with all kinds of magnificent gems. No, not just gems. There were also magic crystals of demonic beasts and human elixirs. None of them were lower than the 9th rank. This was the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity, where the holy law of necromancy, eternal sleep calamity Electrolux, slept forever? Kyre stood up impatiently. After countless efforts, she finally came here. This was her only chance to resurrect Long Houchen. However, where was the inheritance of eternal sleep calamity Electrolux? Is it worth it? Suddenly, an old sigh echoed. Kyre subconsciously took a step back and stared at the huge golden coffin in front of her. A white cloud slowly rose from the golden coffin, floating and condensing in the air. Soon, the white cloud condensed into a human figure. It was exactly the same as the statue she had seen before, except that it didn't have a lower body. The lower body was like white smoke, connected to the golden coffin. The old face was full of sadness. He looked at Kyre gently, sighed softly, and asked her again, Is it worth it? It is worth it. You are eternal sleep calamity Electrolux? Kyre said firmly. Electrolux nodded slightly. Yes, I am holy law of necromancy, eternal sleep calamity, Electrolux. Is it really worth it? Kyre frowned slightly. Of course it is. Electrolux let out a long sigh and said, You're a good girl. I didn't expect that the test I set back then would be completed by you in the end. Do you know, among all the attributes, the one I can't accept the most is your purification attribute? It's almost impossible for you to inherit my mantle, right? Hearing this, Kyre suddenly became anxious. She didn't care about the inheritance, but whether or not she could resurrect Long Houchen. If she couldn't inherit Electrolux's power, wouldn't all her efforts be in vain? I am willing to inherit your power. You said in your message that as long as I can come to the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity, I can accept your inheritance. Are you going to go back on your word? Kyra said stubbornly. Electrolux smiled and said, In the thousands of years I was alive, I have never heard anyone speak to me in such a tone. And you are the one who wants to inherit my power. Kyra was stunned and slowly knelt down in front of Electrolux and kowtowed. I'm sorry, teacher. I was wrong. I hope to inherit your power. You must have a way, right? Electrolux's eyes showed a hint of throbbing. It's all because of the child on your back, the child that should have been my inheritors. Kyra didn't say a word, but kept kowtowing to Electrolux. Soon, her forehead became red and swollen. Electrolux waved his hand and suddenly, a golden light surged from the ground and lifted Kyra's body up. You have kowtowed enough. Yes, I have a way for you to inherit my power. However, if you inherit my power, then your original purifying power will completely dissipate, and your body will even fester and turn into a zombie. This is the inevitable conflict between the purification power and my undead power. If that's the case, are you still willing? If you lose your beauty, even if you resurrect him, will he still like you? I am willing, Kyra said without hesitation. Aren't you worried? Electrolux asked, as if he was unwilling to give up. Kyra shook her head hard. I'm not worried. Please begin. Electrolux looked deeply at Long Houchen, his eyes showing strong emotions, so much so that his smoky body was twisting slightly. After a long time, he said faintly, His heart has been destroyed, and all signs of life have been cut off. Although his soul has not dissipated, it will be very difficult to resurrect him. First of all, he needs a living, beating heart. Kyra looked up at Electrolux. She untied the chains on her body, and carefully put Long Houchen down, letting him lie flat on the golden ground. She looked deeply at Long Houchen, and caressed his pale face. She lowered her head and kissed his forehead. Even though his forehead was so cold that there wasn't a trace of warmth, it still gave her a feeling that he was real. A faint smile appeared on her delicate face, and Kyra slowly stood up. She raised her right hand, and with a flash of black light, her grim reaper scythe appeared in her hand. You're right. In fact, he should be your successor. Please resurrect him. As for the heart, Kyra smiled. Her smile was very sincere, and at this moment, it was as moving as 100 flowers blooming. Even the calamity necromancer, Electrolux, who had been asleep for thousands of years, was stunned when he saw her smile. Use mine. With a flash of black light, Kyra flipped the grim reaper scythe in her hand, and the sharp blade pierced towards her own chest. She had absolute confidence that she could pluck out her own fresh heart. Leaving her heart in his chest seemed to be a very perfect ending. This way, she could never be separated from him. So, she smiled happily. She could already feel the cold sharpness of the grim reaper scythe piercing into her skin. With a flick of her wrist, the sharp scythe would cut open her chest and carefully pluck out her heart. No. A strong golden light rushed up from below, colliding with the grim reaper scythe. The huge scythe was lifted up, but it still left a trail of blood on Kyra's chest. Electrolux said angrily, You silly girl, is he really worth it for you to do this? Don't you know that this purification blade has the effect of purifying souls? Even if it were you, once it pierces your vital parts, you will die for sure. No power can resurrect you. Chapter 231. Kyra looked at Long Houchen affectionately and said, So what? My heart is with him. I can resurrect him. That's enough. I'm willing to die for him. Is there a second heart here other than me? I only beg you to resurrect him. Electrolux was silent. His eyes were full of struggle, but Kyra's attention was on Long Houchen and didn't notice. If only she was like you when I met her back then. Perhaps all of this would not have happened. Or perhaps I would have already died with her. Even if we die together, I will bring happiness with me. Electrolux's murmur woke Kyra up. She raised her head and insisted, Please use my heart. Electrolux suddenly interrupted her and said, Child, don't be hasty. How about this? Let's make a bet. If you win, I will help you resurrect him. If you lose, you have to give up on him and focus on inheriting my power. Although I don't like your purification attribute, I like your personality. I won't bet. Kai shook her head forcefully. I won't bet on anything related to him, because I can't afford to lose. Electrolux said coldly, That's not up to you. At this moment, he revealed the majesty of the divine law of necromancy, the calamity of eternal slumber. With a wave of his hand, Kai felt her body tighten. She couldn't control her body anymore. Even the scythe of the Grim Reaper was forced back into her body. She was pulled to Electrolux's side by the golden light. Then, everything around her began to distort slightly. Everything was changing in a strange way. Everything became illusory, and then became real again. Kai was shocked to find that not only could she not move, she couldn't even make a sound. She couldn't even control the slightest fluctuation of spiritual energy. It was as if her soul was frozen. Electrolux floated quietly beside her. Layers of golden halos were constantly released from his body. Right next to Long Houchen, there was another Kai. One of them was Kai, whose chest had been cut open with a bloody hole and had lost her heart. Then, he pointed his right index finger at Long Houchen's body. The wound on Long Houchen's chest healed at an astonishing speed. Amidst the intense golden light, the golden foundation armor on his body was removed. Under Kai's excited gaze, Long Houchen's pale skin gradually regained some color. All of this was too miraculous. Electrolux seemed to have reignited Long Houchen's life with just a wave of his hand. Electrolux's voice resounded in Kai's mind. I've made him temporarily return to the world of the living. Everything is as if he's alive. Take a guess, when he finds out that you used your own heart to resurrect him, what kind of reaction will he have? Kai's originally excited mood instantly seemed to have been splashed with a basin of ice water. She desperately wanted to break free from Electrolux's restraint. However, how could it be so easy to resist the restraints of this holy law of necromancy, the cataclysm of eternal slumber, who had once brought disaster to the entire human race, and even almost caused the human race to perish? There was nothing she could do. She could only watch as Long Houchen's life force gradually recovered and his body began to tremble. It was so cold. Long Houchen only felt as if he was soaked in ice water, so cold that his whole body was trembling. His deathly still brain gradually began to fluctuate. In the ice-cold feeling, he constantly shivered again and again. He was also awakened by this coldness. His eyes were filled with a golden color, and the rich fluctuation of the light element seemed to have reduced the chill in his body. Where is this? Is this hell? Subconsciously, Long Houchen raised his hand to press on his chest. He was surprised to find that the hole in his chest had disappeared. Vaguely, there seemed to be a beating heart and the feeling of blood flowing in his body. However, his powerful cultivation was nowhere to be found. The feeling of weakness was hitting his brain wave after wave. You're awake. The old voice attracted Long Houchen's attention. He saw the huge coffin and the soul floating in the air at a glance. You are? Where is this? Long Houchen said subconsciously. At this time, his spirit was still a little confused, but the coldness in his body gradually faded. The pure and thick light element in the air made him feel very comfortable, and the spiritual power in his body seemed to be slowly recovering under the injection of these light elements. There was finally some warmth. This is the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. I think you should know who I am. Electrolux said faintly. Long Houchen was shocked and woke up at once. What? This is the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. Then you are. How did I get here? Electrolux pointed to his side and said indifferently, She brought you here. Long Houchen looked in the direction of his finger. The next moment, his whole body froze. His mouth was wide open, his eyes were round, and he suddenly found that he couldn't even make a sound. His whole body seemed to be immobilized, standing there motionless. That was Kai, whose chest was cut open and whose blood flowed all over the ground. Kai, who lost her vitality, whose face was as pale as paper. Kai, how could my Kai? Maintaining this stiff movement for a full half a cup of tea's time, Long Houchen didn't move at all. Electrolux's voice sounded in his ear. She brought the eternal melody that I gave you, carried your corpse on her back, and passed through the Tower of Eternity's layers of difficult tests to come here. She said, "You are my successor," and asked me to resurrect you. You should know how you died. You've already lost your heart. Even with my necromancy, I would need a fresh heart to resurrect you. So, she gave her heart to you. No, Long Houchen looked up to the sky and howled in grief. With a plop, he knelt on the ground and threw himself on Kai-Er's body. He hugged her body tightly, and tears flowed out of his eyes. Kai-Er's corpse was so cold that it was like 10,000 years old profound ice. Long Houchen only felt that the blood in his body had frozen at this moment. How could you be so stupid? How could you be so stupid? Kai, did you think that if you died I would still be able to live on alone? Turning around abruptly, Long Houchen looked at Electrolux. Senior, I beg you, return her heart to her. You must have a way, right? Please resurrect her. Electrolux said coldly, do you think this is a game? Can a heart transplant be repeated again and again? Moreover, even if I can do it, you will still die after losing your heart. At this point, his voice suddenly became gentle. She is already dead. She used her heart to resurrect you, hoping that her heart can fuse with yours, so that the two of you can never be separated. Don't you understand her painstaking efforts? You are the disciple that I have chosen. Now that you are here, it is time to inherit my power. There are plenty of fish in the sea. With your excellence, you will definitely find a better girl than her in the future. Moreover, you can only take revenge if you survive. If you don't die, she won't die to resurrect you. You should seek revenge on the person who killed you. You should seek revenge on the person who killed you, instead of cowardly mourning here. Get up and accept the inheritance of the undead calamity, Electrolux. When you leave this place, you will be the strongest person in the human world. When that time comes, everything will be up to you. You can have as many women as you want. After you have avenged her, you can use the enemy's corpse as a sacrifice to her. Long Houchen carried Kai-Er's corpse and turned to look at Electrolux. His eyes were indifferent. He seemed to have been convinced by Electrolux. The hysteria from before had completely disappeared, and his emotions had also calmed down. Carrying Kai-Er's corpse, he slowly stood up and muttered to himself, "If only one of us can survive, then it's good that she died." There was a strange look in Electrolux's eyes. He turned to look at the real Kai-Er. Long Houchen couldn't see it, but he could. His cold voice resounded in the depths of Kai-Er's soul. "See, this is the man that you are willing to give up your life for." However, Electrolux was disappointed. From Kai-Er's eyes, he could only see sorrow and endless love. She seemed to have not heard Long Houchen's heartless words. "Do you still not understand?" Electrolux questioned Kai-Er angrily. Kai-Er shook her head lightly and didn't even look at Electrolux. "I understand. You are the one who doesn't understand. Because you don't understand him at all." Electrolux snorted coldly. "Don't understand?" He turned to Long Houchen, who had an indifferent look in his eyes, and said in a low voice, "You are right. Her death will help you. Are you ready to inherit my power?" Long Houchen shook his head gently and said, "Inherit your power? What's the point of that to me? You are an executioner. You have the constitution of the Son of Light. You should have brought light to the human world, but in the end you chose darkness. I don't want to inherit your filthy power. Living is more painful than dying. If Kai-Er and I can grow old together, then I will try my best to die later than her. That way, when she dies, I will be by her side to accompany her and send her off. If I die before her, then when her life comes to an end, she will be so lonely. What power, what revenge? None of this is important to me. Perhaps I still have a lot of responsibilities, but how can I let my Kyr wait? At this point, he turned to look at his left hand. I'm sorry, Sun Moon Divine Snail. I've disappointed you. I can't finally bring light to the human race. Even if I'm the son of light, even if I believe that my heart is pure. But I still have a weakness that can never be changed. Just let me be willful and selfish for once. Kyr walked slowly. I'm coming. With his left arm around Kyr, he lowered his head and kissed her red lips deeply. He raised his right hand and condensed the spiritual power that he had just recovered into his right palm. Then, he suddenly slapped the top of his head. You're not allowed to die. Electrolux shouted unwillingly. His soul figure instantly appeared in front of Long Houchen and grabbed his arm. Long Houchen raised his head and looked at him coldly. What right do you have to stop me? For some reason, even with Electrolux's powerful soul strength, when Long Houchen's cold gaze swept over him, he actually shivered. He actually couldn't find any words to refute him. Scram! Long Houchen roared. He struggled fiercely. Electrolux grabbed his arm tightly. Don't tell me that, in this world, there's nothing else that you're reluctant to part with? It's just love between a man and a woman. Is it worth it to die? Long Houchen laughed scornfully. From what you've said, you don't even know what love is. Deep in love, it's dull. Deep in love, it's even more intense. Without her, my heart is already dead. There's no meaning for me to part with any worldly attachments. This world is already colorless to me. Don't hinder me from finding my Kyr. Do you think that I won't die just because you're holding my hand? As he spoke, Long Houchen's eyes suddenly lit up. One could vaguely see that there seemed to be a golden flame burning in his pupils in an instant. Bastard, you're crazy! Electrolux yelled in exasperation. At the same time, he pointed a finger at the center of Long Houchen's eyebrows. Long Houchen was directly sent flying by his finger and heavily hit the wall of the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. If Electrolux's action was a little slower, Long Houchen's soul would have been ignited. At that time, let alone a necromancer, even if a deity came, they wouldn't be able to resurrect him. After hitting the wall and bouncing back, Long Houchen still tightly held on to Kyr. His right hand swung again, and without hesitation, hit his head. Madness. Electrolux felt an unprecedented madness from Long Houchen's indifferent eyes. There was no sorrow greater than a dead heart. Perhaps this was the true meaning of his gaze. She's still alive. These simple words were more effective than any obstruction. Long Houchen's right hand froze on top of his head. He looked down at Kyr, but he still didn't see any signs of life. However, it was also at this moment that a sorrowful cry sounded. Long Houchen. Kyr, who was in Long Houchen's arms, turned into golden light and disappeared. But right next to undead calamity Electrolux, Kyr appeared alive. Her figure flashed, and she rushed into his arms, crying loudly. Kyr's body was warm. Her tears almost instantly wet Long Houchen's clothes. Her arms were so strong, and she hugged him tightly. Kyr. Long Houchen couldn't stop calling her name. He wanted to cry, but he couldn't shed a single tear. The joy of regaining something he had lost brought a ray of light to his dead soul. Hugging her tightly, his chin trembled, and his voice was filled with sobs. Looking at the man and woman hugging, holy law of necromancy and undead calamity, Electrolux said with difficulty, "You win." Chapter 232. You've won. It was a simple word, but it was extremely difficult for Electrolux to say it. His soul floated there in a daze, and his eyes were filled with incomprehension and disbelief. In his heart, it was as if the most important thing had been touched, causing his soul to fluctuate unstably, and the layers of white light were showing signs of dissipating. But at this time, Long Houchen and Kai-Er were completely immersed in the joy of their reunion, and did not notice the changes in him at all. Kai-Er, Kai-Er. Long Houchen kept murmuring her name. At this moment, his emotional state of despair changed because of the appearance of Kai-Er, and it turned into extreme fear. He was afraid that the Kai-Er in front of him was fake, and that the glimmer of hope that he had painstakingly birthed would be shattered just like that. So, he hugged her tightly, as if he wanted to fuse her into his body. He kept calling her name. Long Houchen could still clearly remember how he felt when his heart was pierced by the demon emperor. Darkness approached, and there was no resentment or pain in his heart, only endless reluctance and longing for Kai. Darkness gradually descended, and Kai-Er's figure became blurry. Only then did he start to fear death. The last thought in his mind was, "Will I never see Kai-Er again?" But now, he was alive again, and his Kai-Er was finally back in front of him. This man's joy and hope could not be described with words. He hugged her tightly, and the extreme fear in his heart gradually turned into extreme happiness. If this was a dream, he hoped that he would never wake up. "If you want to be together forever, then calm down." The gentle voice carried a strong soul vibration, and it woke the two who were immersed in happiness. Long Houchen and Kai-Er turned their heads at the same time, and only then did they see the changes in undead calamity Electrolux. Electrolux's solidified soul was emitting circles of white light. On his body, the aura of death was slowly spreading outwards. The pair of eyes on the body formed by the soul seemed to be much brighter than before. He was staring at them with a burning gaze. Long Houchen didn't understand what he meant, but Kai-Er shivered. That's right. Long Houchen was not really resurrected. He was just temporarily revived by Electrolux using a special method. She immediately took a step forward and said anxiously, "You just said that we won. Since you've won, shouldn't you help Houchen revive?" Long Houchen was stunned. He looked at Kai-Er in confusion. "Am I not fine?" "Kai-Er, what are you talking about?" Electrolux smiled faintly and said, "You're such a silly kid. Have you forgotten what happened before? Although the scene you just saw was simulated by my soul force, it's still not enough. But in a sense, it can be considered reality. If I had promised this girl to revive you with her heart, then the scene just now would be real." "Kai-Er, you." Long Houchen hugged Kai-Er tightly in his arms. "Why are you so silly? Don't you understand that if you die, what's the point of me living?" Kai-Er lowered her head and buried it in his arms. When Long Houchen was just a corpse, she only had one thought in her mind, and that was to revive him. But the scene just now was also very stimulating to her. Especially the words that Long Houchen said. That's right. If she revived him, and she died, he would still die. Then what's the point of everything she did now? At this moment the two were very quiet. Kai-Er didn't seem to be in a hurry to revive Long Houchen. Either they lived together or they die together. After thinking about this, she felt relieved. So, there really is true love in the world? A bitter smile appeared on Electrolux's old face. Although it was only a body condensed from the soul, at this moment, he seemed to have aged a little. Of course. Long Houchen raised his head and looked at Electrolux with a burning gaze. He didn't have a good impression of Electrolux at all. It was this executioner in front of him who caused the holy demon continent to be plunged into misery and suffering, and the vitality of mankind was greatly damaged. If it wasn't for him, how could there be the Dark Age? If it wasn't for him, perhaps everything would be different. As the possessor of the Son of Light constitution, the person chosen by the Goddess of Light, eventually embarked on a path of destruction. Long Houchen still deeply remembered the helplessness in his heart when the Sun-Moon Divine Snail told him. How could Electrolux not see the rejection in Long Houchen's eyes? He said calmly, "Long Houchen, you now have a chance to choose. Compared to her, you are more suitable to inherit my ability. I can see that you have officially become the blessed of the Goddess of Light, and you must look down on me, a person who is walking towards death and darkness. However, now, you can only survive by choosing to inherit my power. On one side is the woman you love, and on the other side is your faith. Now you can make a choice. If you choose to inherit my power, you can be with her, and you can survive together. Moreover, you will become stronger. If you choose to give up, then you will die, and she will die because of you. Make your choice. Long Houchen was stunned, and so was Kaer. They didn't expect that Electrolux would let Long Houchen make such a choice at this time. You're saying that even without my heart, you can still help him resurrect? Kaer asked in surprise. Electrolux said proudly, I am the great holy law of necromancy, Electrolux, the calamity of eternal slumber. In this world, there are too few things that I can't do. His soul is still here, so what's the big deal about reconstructing his body? But why should I help him resurrect? Unless he is willing to inherit my power and become the new calamity of necromancy, otherwise, you will have to fend for yourselves. You will watch him die, and as for your choice, it has nothing to do with me. At most, I will sleep for a few thousand years, and wait for the next inheritor to come. Kaer instantly turned her head to look at Long Houchen, but the moment her beautiful eyes met Long Houchen's, the excitement in her heart was instantly extinguished, as if a bucket of ice water had fallen from the sky. That's right. Only those who chose to accept Electrolux's inheritance could be resurrected, but Long Houchen was the blessed of the goddess of light, the son of light. How could he inherit the power of Electrolux? Electrolux was the enemy of mankind, the source of evil, and the calamity of eternal slumber. If Long Houchen inherited his power, would he still be the son of light? If he did that, he would give up his faith. Kaer couldn't say the words that were on the tip of her tongue. She loved this man deeply. How could she let this man give up his faith for her? Kaer knew very well that to Long Houchen, this faith was even more important than his life. He was a knight with the purest heart. Asking him to give up his faith was tantamount to asking him to commit suicide. Without saying anything, Kaer's tears fell from her eyes again. She stretched out her arms and wrapped them around Long Houchen's waist, pressing her body tightly against his. She didn't want to think about anything else. Let him choose. If he chose death, then she would die with him. At this moment, Kaer suddenly felt very tired. She just wanted to hug Long Houchen like this. No matter if he lived or died, she wanted to stay like this forever. The lifelessness in Long Houchen's eyes gradually disappeared. He lowered his head and looked at Kaer in his arms. His eyes were shining, but he didn't seem to be struggling emotionally. A faint smile began to appear on his lips. Long Houchen raised his head and looked at Electrolux calmly. You've made up your mind? Electrolux looked at him in surprise. He originally thought that Long Houchen would be struggling internally, but he didn't expect him to look at him with such a gaze so quickly. It was clear that he had already made up his mind. Long Houchen said calmly, I'm willing to accept your inheritance and live on. Whether it was Electrolux or Kaer, both of them were shocked when they heard his words. Kaer fiercely raised her head, looking at him with eyes full of disbelief. Long Houchen, you. Electrolux was even more incredulous. You're not even afraid of death, but now you want to give up your faith? Have you forgotten that you're the son of light, the one chosen by the goddess of light? Long Houchen raised his hand and gently stroked Kaer's long hair. I'm willing to die for her, and I'm also willing to live for her. At this point, he paused for a moment. When he looked at Electrolux again, his eyes were already shining brightly. For Kaer, so what if I give up my faith? Boom! 2 explosions occurred at almost the same time. One appeared in Kaer's mind. She felt her mind go blank. She had completely lost the ability to think. The other explosion occurred directly on the body formed by the soul of holy law of necromancy and calamity, necromancer Electrolux. The terrifying explosion produced a huge soul wave, and both Long Houchen and Kaer were blasted away. Electrolux raised his head and let out a painful scream. His entire soul body was trembling violently. Huge clouds of death aura spewed out from his soul, and an even denser holy white flame began to burn on top of his soul. With the momentum of not caring about the cost, it crazily spread to every corner of his soul. Long Houchen hugged Kaer tightly, using his own body to withstand the terrifying impact of the soul power. Electrolux's soul power was too strong. Even the Demon Emperor couldn't compare to him. In the face of this terrifying soul pressure, he couldn't even struggle. The terrifying soul wave lasted for a full 15 minutes before it gradually calmed down. No. This is impossible. How can there be such feelings between humans? How can this be? Humans are despicable and shameless. For the sake of benefits, everything else is nothing. Why would there be such feelings, why? Electrolux howled hysterically. At this moment, he was like a wounded wolf, completely in a state of madness. Without the soul shock, Long Houchen hugged Kaer and looked at him. At this moment, Long Houchen was also full of confusion. He had already agreed to inherit Electrolux's legacy, so why did this holy law of necromancy become like this? Electrolux kept on howling, but what Long Houchen could feel was that in this 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity, the death aura was disappearing at an alarming rate. The light element here, which was already very rich, gradually gained a holy aura. This madness lasted for a while before Electrolux gradually calmed down. Although he was a soul body, he seemed to be panting heavily. His entire body was almost half the size of before, but it became extremely white, pure white. At this moment, his soul looked more like a cluster of flames, and the dancing soul fire in his eye sockets gradually calmed down. I didn't expect this, I really didn't expect this. Electrolux's voice sounded a little stiff. Although his emotions had calmed down, the feeling of disbelief was still there. Long Houchen looked at him in confusion. "Senior, you can let me inherit your power now." Electrolux shook his head and said sadly, "No, I don't have this qualification. I was wrong, I didn't expect that I was really wrong. I was wrong for thousands of years. I was wrong. He shook his head vigorously, his face full of pain. Kaer held Long Houchen's hand. At this moment, the blank in her mind had been filled with the figure of Long Houchen. She just stood beside him gently, the original coldness in her temperament had completely disappeared. The haze in her heart from childhood had been swept away, not leaving a trace. If one were to ask her why, then she would definitely answer that it was the power of love. That's right, Long Houchen used his undying love for her to give up his faith, to sublimate Kaer's soul. All the negative emotions in her heart were purified, resulting in the changes before her eyes. Nothing else mattered. In this life, having this love was enough. Electrolux raised his head and looked at the couple in front of him with a burning gaze. His gentle gaze revealed an indescribable envy, but there was no jealousy. Would you like to listen to a story? A story that happened more than 6,800 years ago. Electrolux's voice was a little strange, and a strong sense of sorrow bloomed from his body. For some reason, looking at him like this, Long Houchen felt a faint sense of sympathy and nodded subconsciously. Electrolux said faintly, 6,897 years ago, I was born in a city in the Pombo Empire in the northwest of the mainland. This city was called Sidi. My father was the castellan of Sidi City, a hereditary count. I was his only son. From the day I was born, I was a noble. In order for me to inherit the count's position in the future, my father hired the best teachers to teach me all kinds of knowledge and etiquette. When I was 6, I was discovered to have a strong affinity with the light element. I had the constitution of the son of the light. Although nearly 7,000 years have passed, I can still deeply remember my father's ecstasy at that time. He hugged me and spun us in the hall, shouting excitedly, "Electrolux, you are my pride." From then on, I became a light magus. My training speed shocked all the teachers. When I was 11 years old, I became a 4th grade great magician. At 13, I became a magic shooter. At 15, I became the youngest 6th grade mage in the whole mainland. Hearing this, Long Houchen was also shocked. Although he was also a son of the light, he had not reached the 6th grade when he was 15. In other words, when they were both 15, Electrolux was more outstanding and powerful than him. My father said that I already had the ability to shock the world. So, he personally took me to participate in the battle of geniuses between the 3 empires of the mainland, hosted by the brilliant Vatican. Only youths under 20 could participate in the battle of geniuses. By the way, is the brilliant Vatican still around? Do they still rule the mainland? Long Houchen shook his head and said, "No, as early as 6,000 years ago, when the Dark Ages came, the brilliant Vatican was destroyed by the demons." Destroyed? Electrolux was stunned. Then, he said with a strange tone, "It's good that they were destroyed, it's good that they were destroyed. I knew that one day they would meet their end." Where was I? The battle of geniuses. Kaya reminded him. Yes, the battle of geniuses. In that battle of geniuses, I was undoubtedly the center of attention. Almost no opponent could last more than a minute in front of me. When I was young, my looks were not inferior to yours now. Who knows how many socialites from the 3 empires stroked their hair coquettishly just to catch a glimpse of me. The finals finally came, and my opponent was the empire's princess, Fu Luo. She was also a genius. She was a powerful summoner. With the support of the imperial family, although she was only 16 years old, she already had a natal summon beast, the violet electric astral dragon. Although her cultivation was not as good as mine, her endless summons were very difficult to deal with. That battle lasted for a full hour. In the end, she lost to me due to a lack of spiritual energy. That was how I became the final champion. And in that battle of geniuses, our Pombo Empire was also the biggest winner. Even after thousands of years, when Electrolux said this, his face was still full of pride. It was clear how much attention was paid to the situation. At that time, the Holy Demon Continent was still under the rule of humans, and the total population of humans was probably several times, or even 10 times that of the present. And this battle of geniuses was undoubtedly the highest stage for youngsters to display their abilities. How honorable was that glory to be crowned the final champion? The glorious Vatican's Pope at that time personally gave me the reward, and the Empire directly conferred me the title of Viscount, with 100 square kilometers of land. The reward I received was a set of substandard artifacts, which later became known as epic-grade equipment. At that time, I was flushed with success, and possessed the greatest glory of all the youngsters on the continent. Even the Pope's son, Pero, was overshadowed by me. As the saying goes, no discord, no concord. The battle with Princess Fu Luo also made us appreciate each other. From then on, we were also hailed as the Empire's twin stars, and were placed with high hopes. And I was also directly transferred to the Royal Magic Academy by the Empire's Emperor to further my studies with Princess Fu Luo, and received the Empire's full support. Although they were only listening to him tell the story, Long Houchen and Kai could also imagine how successful Electrolux was at that time. Receiving such glory at the mere age of 16, no matter who it would have been the same. Electrolux's face revealed gentleness. During the time I was furthering my studies in the Royal Magic Academy, Fu Luo and I were together day and night, training and researching magic together. Between us, our feelings deepened day by day. I deeply fell in love with her beauty and genius. When we were together, there would always be endless topics to talk about. We made vows of undying love, and were inseparable. Not only did the warmth of our feelings not affect my training, it instead caused my cultivation to increase faster and faster. At the age of 18, I had already become an 8th grade Grand Magus. With my training speed at that time, I was certain that by the age of 20, I would definitely be able to break through to the 9th grade, and become the youngest 9th grade powerhouse in the history of the Empire. And as time passed, the advantage of my innate talent was fully revealed. Although Fu Luo was equally outstanding, in the end, she still couldn't compare to my innate talent as the Scion of Light. When I broke through to the 8th grade, she had just broken through to the 7th grade. At that time, I could see that she was unhappy, but I didn't think much of it. I even told her that I was willing to stay where I was, and wait for her to catch up to my cultivation. At the same time, after breaking through to the 8th grade, I asked my father to propose to His Majesty, and agree to the marriage between Fu Luo and me. Everything went so smoothly, and His Majesty very happily agreed to let us be engaged. We were only waiting for the day I broke through to the 9th grade, and then we would be married. At that time, I was already hailed as the man most likely to become a god. The glorious Curia's current pope personally came to the Empire, and expressed his willingness to accept me as a disciple, and let me receive his inheritance. For the Empire, for Fu Luo, I refused. At that time, the Curia's influence on the continent was extremely great, and from a certain perspective, the 3 great empires all had to listen to the Curia's orders. And I could feel His Majesty's unwillingness. For His Majesty, I would rather offend the Pope than leave the Empire. After reaching the 8th grade, the speed of my cultivation had obviously slowed down. My teacher at the Royal Magic Academy told me that this was because I had always been purely training, and lacked experience in the outside world. He suggested that I go to the outside world to experience more, and experience all the magical places on the continent, so that I could continue to improve through more enlightenment. I accepted his suggestion, and told Fu Luo about this, hoping to bring her along to complete this training. But, at that time, Fu Luo refused. Although she loved me deeply, she had a competitive streak in her bones. I knew that she had always hoped to surpass me. But, the distance between us grew bigger and bigger. So, she decided to stay in the academy to continue training, and strive to catch up to my cultivation, in order to reach the 9th grade as soon as possible, and marry Fu Luo, and also for greater glory and the glory of the Empire. I embarked on this journey of training, but I never would have thought that, because of the gains from this training, it would become the nightmare of my life in the near future. At this point, Electrolux's expression gradually became sinister, and his anger burst forth. Intense soul undulations caused the Tower of Eternity to tremble. After leaving the imperial capital, I roamed the continent. With my cultivation of the 8th grade, I almost didn't encounter any difficulties. I spent a whole 2 years, traveling to almost every city in the 3 great empires. I saw different local customs, and experienced the joys and sorrows of the world. Whether it was my vision or my cultivation, they all improved by leaps and bounds. Perhaps it was because I was chosen by the Goddess of Light, and had many fortuitous encounters in these 2 years. Moreover, I obtained an incomparably powerful technique. When I returned to the imperial capital, my cultivation had already reached the peak of the 8th grade. Seeing Fu Luo again, I couldn't help but hug her and cry tears of joy. I could feel that I was already at the edge of the 9th grade, and was only a step away from breaking through. I believed that it wouldn't be long before I could marry my beloved Princess Fu Luo. I would also become the strongest person in the Empire in the future. At that time, I didn't have any ulterior motives. I told Fu Luo about all the fortuitous encounters I had in these 2 years, and let her feel the joy in my heart and the moving process. However, there was something that made me slightly unhappy. The Pope's son actually entered the Royal Magic Academy to study. At that time, I was very curious, why did he come here? Compared to our Pombo Empire, the brilliant Vatican's research on magic should be more in-depth. There was no need for him to come here to study. However, because of the joy of being together with Fu Luo, I didn't think too much about it. I shared everything about my trip with Flo without reservation. Fu Luo was very interested in the technique I obtained from the fortuitous encounter, and hoped that I could give it to her to learn, but I refused. That technique was indeed amazing, but it couldn't be easily learned or used. Because the price to pay was too great, I was afraid that she would be hurt. Do you know what kind of technique it was? Speaking of which, I still feel that it was extremely amazing. Although the technique was only a fragment, it required the fusion of souls to be able to practice it. It seemed to be the ability of an ancient race from another world. It was called a soul technique. This technique had a very strange name, called the tortoise-shell technique. When I first obtained it, I thought it was only a defensive technique. But after careful research, I realized that it had nothing to do with defense. Instead, it was a prophetic ability. At that time, in the entire continent, only the brilliant Vatican had prophets. I also had some understanding of them. They could only predict the future. But this technique's use was to predict the present. It could be said to be a type of divination technique. It had one thing that was most overbearing. That was the absolute establishment. In other words, once the tortoise-shell technique was activated, then all living beings within its area of effect would be affected. Even the caster was no exception. In its introduction, it said that even gods within the area of effect of the tortoise-shell technique would be restricted by the absolute establishment, and would not be immune to its power. What a terrifying cultivation technique this was! But the absolute establishment also brought with it the absolute danger. This technique had an extremely high degree of uncertainty. After using it, the caster would not be able to control the outcome of the divination. In other words, the result could be good or bad. And no matter what, the caster would have to bear a part of it. So, once this ability was used, and luck was not on your side, it was very likely that after using it a few times, you would become a sacrifice for the tortoise-shell technique. Tell me, how could I be willing to learn such a technique? How could I let Fu Luo learn it? At this point, Electrolux's face was full of bitterness, but Fu Luo did not understand my painstaking efforts. She thought that I was keeping it to myself, and was unwilling to pass it on to her. She even left in a huff. The absolute establishment and the attraction of being able to have the same effect on gods was too great. So much so that she could no longer treat it as normal. She did not think that if I was really keeping it to myself, there was no need to tell her about it at all. At that time, I thought that she was just being impulsive and did not care too much. She would be fine after 2 days. As expected, when I went to look for her again 2 days later, she seemed to have completely recovered, just that she seemed to have a lot on her mind. But her attitude towards me was as good as before. She did not say a word about what happened that day. But what I did not expect was that this venomous woman had already schemed against me. Electrolux clenched his teeth, his entire body trembling. It was obvious that the encounter back then had brought him too much pain. It was a clear day. The weather was good, the blue sky was cloudless, and the sunlight was especially abundant. The rich light elements made me, as the child of light, feel indescribably comfortable. That feeling of being immersed in the sunlight was too wonderful. Fu Luo asked me to go on an outing. Naturally, I agreed. I also told her that after this outing, I would be going into seclusion to break through to the 9th level. Once I succeed, I would ask His Majesty to bestow marriage upon me, and marry her into the family. At that time, I believed that His Majesty would at least give me the title of an earl, and also the title of a court mage. We left the imperial city and came to the outskirts. Just as we were sightseeing, suddenly I found that we were surrounded. A large number of black-clothed men blocked off all our escape routes. Even their heads were wrapped in black cloth, not revealing a single bit of skin. The moment they appeared, they launched a frenzied attack on us. At that time, Fu Luo seemed to be stunned. With her cultivation close to the 8th level, she seemed to have forgotten how to use magic. As a man, protecting his own woman was a given, and I was extremely conceited at the time. With my peak 8th level cultivation and the various powerful magic that I had painstakingly researched. Although those black-clothed men were very strong, I killed many of them. But there were more and more of them. Every single one of them was above the 7th level. At that time I felt that it was strange. If these were people sent by the other two empires to infiltrate, with so many powerhouses, how could the Imperial City's powerhouses not notice? If this continued, I was afraid that Fu Luo and I would never be able to escape. So, I made a prompt decision, and immediately broke out with Fu Luo. At this time, Fu Luo seemed to have woken up, and began to use all sorts of summoning magic to help me. We rode on her summoned beasts and fled towards the Imperial City. Just when I thought that the enemy would not be able to catch up, that we had already broken out of the encirclement and could even see the Imperial City walls in the distance. Suddenly, a trace of coldness invaded my heart. When I looked down, I found that a pitch-black dagger had pierced deeply into my chest, and the handle of the dagger was in Fu Luo's hand. At this point, Long Houchen and Kai couldn't help but exclaim softly. They never thought that this Princess Fu Luo would actually attack Electrolux. They were lovers who had pledged their undying love. At that moment, her expression was filled with malevolence. Thick sorrow flowed from Electrolux's eyes. She was even muttering, why didn't you pass the turtle armor spell to me? Why? I didn't want to do this. My heart hurt even more than my wounds. The coldness in my chest slowly turned numb. I could feel my life force flowing out from that dagger. Even at that time, I still couldn't believe that the one who attacked me was my beloved Fu Luo. I loved her so much. In order to marry her, I trained hard day and night. All so that she could be with me in the future, to be happy, to be able to hold my head high. However, she used a dagger that was covered in poison to stab into my left chest, where a normal person's heart should be. That stab was so decisive. She clearly knew that I didn't have any defenses against her. Moreover, that stab was timed at the moment when I was the most relaxed. And also at this time, more black-clothed people appeared in front of us. They seemed to have been waiting there for a long time, and had already predicted everything in front of them. The previous ambush was just a prelude, and Fu Luo's stab was to make me lose the chance to escape. A somewhat familiar cold voice sounded. He said to Fu Luo, "Kill him." It was only then that I came to my senses. My will to live made me quickly push Fu Luo away, and jump down from her summoned beast. At that time, Fu Luo also seemed to be in a daze. She also seemed to have a psychological change because of the stab, and didn't attack me immediately. Using this chance, I took out a scroll. This was given to me by a scroll master. It's called an evasion scroll. I was teleported 20 miles in an instant. They obviously didn't expect me to have something like this. That was how I managed to escape the siege. The moment the evasion scroll took effect, I still clearly remember Fu Luo, who had woken up, hurriedly urged her summoned beast to attack me. At that moment, there was only cold, murderous intent in her eyes. There wasn't even a hint of her previous gentleness. Long Houchen and Kai were completely immersed in the story of Electrolux, and even forgot about the situation they were facing. Feeling the deep sorrow emanating from Electrolux, they could imagine what he was feeling at that time. For a moment the two were speechless. There was a reason why the Son of Light betrayed his faith. However, he still betrayed in the end, but just because of that, he became an undead calamity? Chapter 233. The sadness in Electrolux's eyes slowly turned into coldness. Do you think that just Fu Luo's betrayal is enough to betray the faith of the light? You are wrong. If it was just that, it would not have caused such a change in me. Long Houchen, you are also a scion of light. You should understand how determined our hearts are as the chosen of the goddess of light. However, the one who betrayed me was not only Princess Fu Luo, but the entire world. Using the escape scroll, I escaped their encirclement. At that time, I only felt a chill in my heart. All the good things in my heart seemed to have disappeared with Fu Luo's betrayal. But even then, I did not hate her. I loved her deeply, and no matter what, I was willing to think of her in a positive light. The man in black who appeared at the end made me guess that perhaps Fu Luo was also threatened by something, and had no choice but to do it. Although I knew she was a princess, and no one could threaten her, I was still willing to think that way. I was so stupid at that time. Fu Luo's stab hit the center of my left chest. But she did not know that I am different from normal people. My heart is on the right side. So, although her poison dagger injured me, it was not fatal. I endured the pain, and found a tree hole to recuperate. Using the pills I obtained during my travels, I first stabilized the poison in my body, and then used my own pure light element to slowly expel the poison. This process was painful and long. But I was very clear that even if I wanted to ask Fu Luo, I had to wait until my body had fully recovered. I heard voices outside the tree hole many times, and there seemed to be signs of a large number of troops being mobilized. But at that time, I did not think that these troops would be mobilized because of me. It took me 2 whole months to recover from my injuries, and recover my cultivation base. I quietly left the tree hole, and returned to the imperial capital. But, before I could enter the city gates, it was as if I was struck by lightning. Right next to the city gates, there was a very obvious royal notice. The notice read, "The Empire's Viscount Electrolux, coveted Princess Fu Luo's powerful cultivation method, ambushed the princess and stole it. As a result, the princess was heavily injured. Fled for treason. Convicted of treason. Stripped of his title. Everyone has the right to punish him. If any commoners discover any traces of him, they must report it. You will be rewarded with 10,000 gold coins." I never thought that they would be so despicable as to make a false accusation. Moreover, it wasn't just the royal family's announcement. There was also a glorious church's announcement. The content was almost the same. They said that I was a heretic, that I had been corrupted by darkness. At that time, I was in a daze for a full hour before I gradually came back to my senses. I love Fu Luo deeply, but I'm not an idiot. At this point in time, if I didn't know that I had fallen into a huge conspiracy, I wouldn't be fit to be the successor of the Child of Light. I immediately sought a secluded place to disguise myself. At that time, I thought that I had to find evidence that they had deceived His Majesty and the Vatican to prove my innocence. The crux of the matter was Fu Luo. So I'm going to find her and ask her about it. Perhaps it's because a few months have passed, or perhaps it's because they think that I've already died under the poison dagger, so the imperial capital isn't under martial law. After I disguised myself, I easily returned to the imperial city. Looking at this once familiar place, my heart ached even more. At night, I snuck into the imperial palace. I'm very familiar with everything here. Although I'm a mage, I have too many ways to sneak into the places I want to go since I've already reached the 8th level. I came to Fu Luo's bedroom, and there, I saw another person. The Pope's son, Pero. The two of them were talking, and in Fu Luo's bedroom. At that time, I had already guessed some of their relationship, but I still didn't want to believe it. But when I heard their conversation clearly, I realized how foolish I was, and how big this conspiracy was. At that time, Fu Luo questioned Pero why he hadn't found me yet. Pero told her that he had already mobilized the glorious church's forces, and was cooperating with the Empire's forces to find traces of me. If alive, he wanted to see me. If dead, he wanted to see my corpse. He had to get the technique in my hands. From their conversation, I gradually got some clues. As it turns out, Pero had already come to the Royal Magic Academy a few years before I left to travel. He had 2 goals for coming here. One was to communicate with the Emperor, hoping to be able to recruit me into the glorious church. The other was to woo Fu Luo. At first, His Majesty didn't agree to let me join the glorious church. Pero stayed behind. He used all sorts of methods to woo Fu Luo. Fu Luo, that bitch, couldn't resist his flowery words and the various techniques and pills from the glorious church, and finally fell under his attacks. Pero suggested to her that because I had the constitution of the child of light, I was already a threat to the glorious church's future rule, so the church must get rid of me. That was the only way for their bloodline to rule the Vatican forever. When he became the Pope, Fu Luo would be his empress. Originally, Fu Luo still had some feelings for me, but in the end, Pero suggested to His Majesty that the glorious church was willing to help the Pombo Empire unify the continent and defeat the other two empires. He also expressed to Fu Luo that she could learn the techniques I obtained from me. Whether it was the empire's royal family or Fu Luo, they all fell under this temptation. As for me, I've become a sacrifice for this benefit. Their plan was originally almost perfect. While I was out with Fu Luo, they surrounded us and exhausted my strength. On the way back, Fu Luo attacked me when I was unprepared. This way, it would be very difficult for me to escape. At that time, as long as they killed me, the Empire and the Church would pin the crime of treason on me. Then, even if I was once the pride of the Empire, I would soon be drowned out by the official public opinion. I hated it. I never thought that my country, my lover, and my faith would betray me at the same time. At that time, I only felt my mind go blank. Just as Fu Luo and Pero were getting intimate, I suddenly charged in and launched a fatal attack on them. My appearance was too sudden for them. Although they were also the cream of the crop of the younger generation, there was still quite a gap between their strength and mine. And in the midst of a surprise attack, very quickly I took the initiative. Pero was heavily injured by me. Fu Luo was also subdued by my attacks. And at this time, although a large number of court experts rushed over, but I used Fu Luo and Pero's lives as hostages. They did not dare to act rashly. At that time, I questioned Fu Luo, "Why did you do this to me? What did I do wrong to her?" "In order to live," she begged me bitterly. "But I've heard their conversation before. How could I believe her words?" At that time, I only had one thought, and that was to die together with them. I was once a proud son of heaven, but at that time, I had become a traitor. The huge difference was something I could not accept. I no longer had anything to live for. I only wanted to die together with this adulterous couple. But that Pero was the son of the Pope after all, and had many life-saving methods. Just as I was prepared to die together with them, he used a special method to attract the Pope's attack. I was heavily injured, and I could not bear to attack Fu Luo. In the end, I could only choose to break out of the encirclement and escape. When I finally broke out of the encirclement and hid in a secret place in the Empire, I was already covered in injuries and barely made it out alive. Immediately after, the Empire began a city-wide manhunt. They searched for traces of me. I once saved a beggar in the Empire, and it was with his help that I was lucky enough to escape their pursuit. But, when I had just recovered from my injuries, then I received a piece of news that was like a bolt from the blue. They captured my family. Electrolux gritted his teeth and said, "They knew that I was hiding in the Empire, and issued an announcement to execute my family for treason." I still remember that day clearly. The sky seemed to have turned blood red. When His Majesty gave the order to kill in front of the people of the Empire, when I saw with my own eyes that Pero and Fu Luo, that pair of bitches in armor, using sharp blades to chop off the heads of my family, the last ray of hope and light in my heart was completely extinguished. Can you imagine? A person watching all of his family being killed with his own eyes. Father, mother, sister, and all of his family, even the young children, they did not let them go. They executed my entire family. I know they were waiting for me to appear, waiting for me to fly into the fire like a moth. They knew my character too well. But at that time, a black token that I once obtained during a training was affected by my resentment and was activated. At that time, my whole body was cold, but I could not move. Because of this, I could only watch as my family members were killed by them one by one. At that time I was crazy, completely in a state of madness. The blood of my family dyed the ground of the Empire's square red. My entire family, 367 people, not a single one was spared. They all died under their butcher's knife. By the time I recovered from the coldness, none of my family members had survived. I seemed to see their resentful spirits lingering in the sky, unwilling to accept their fate. I did not do it. My family was already dead, and I left that place with monstrous resentment. And during this massacre I did not appear, which made them think that I had left the Empire. The great manhunt was temporarily over, but they searched the entire continent for traces of me. Finally, out of the Empire, I chose a direction and ran wildly. After running wildly for 7 days and 7 nights, I collapsed in the middle of a valley due to exhaustion. From that day onwards there was no light in my heart, only endless resentment and hatred. I wanted to live for hatred. I wanted to kill all those who betrayed me, all those who harmed me. I don't know why, but when I lost my light, the tortoise-shell technique mysteriously disappeared. Perhaps it was because my hatred disgusted it, but this no longer mattered to me. From that black token, I obtained the inheritance of an ancient necromancer. Light and necromancy, these were originally completely opposing abilities. But with my talent, I gradually merged them. I needed power strong enough to overthrow the entire Pombo kingdom and destroy the glorious church. I no longer had any relatives, and in this world, everyone was my enemy. Only their blood and lives could offset the hatred in my heart. I cultivated day and night, I frantically increased my strength. Also that one day I could take revenge. Hatred became my greatest motivation. A scion of light, hiding in the mountains for 10 years, can you imagine how terrifying that was? When I left the mountains, I was no longer the scion of light, Electrolux, but the holy law of necromancy, Calamity Electrolux. I killed everyone on sight, turning all living things into my undead subordinates. I started from a small city, and gradually gathered my undead army. When I returned to the Pombo Kingdom's capital, I already had 1 million undead by my side. The Pombo Kingdom was completely destroyed by me. Fu Luo, that bitch, fled to the glorious church with Pero. So, I brought my undead army to attack the church. I wanted to destroy them all and avenge my family. Hearing this, Long Houchen couldn't help but say angrily, "Have you ever thought about how many innocent people you killed with your revenge? The Pombo Kingdom's royal family and the church are your enemies. But why did you implicate so many people?" He sympathized with Electrolux's plight, but he deeply hated his cruel methods and the harm he did to humanity. Electrolux's eyes showed a hint of sadness. I hesitated and regretted. But the 3 empires and the church were too powerful at that time, and it was impossible for me to take revenge alone. For revenge, I walked to the dark side, But at that time I never thought that I was wrong. In my eyes there was only slaughter. Long Houchen didn't speak again, because he could feel deep sadness and regret from Electrolux's current emotions. He regretted it? Electrolux, the former Calamity Necromancy who brought great disaster to humanity, regretted it? Could it be because of me and Kai? Even if Electrolux felt remorseful, his feelings in Long Houchen's heart wouldn't change. What was done, how could repentance change it? Electrolux's hands were stained with the blood of countless humans. I destroyed my homeland, and the brilliant church joined forces with the other 2 empires to launch a war against me in order to deal with me. At that time, I had already occupied nearly 1/3 of the continent. I had a large number of undead under my command, and their soul fires were under my control. They were incomparably loyal. Under my command, millions of undead swarmed towards the brilliant church like a plague. Even though the brilliant church had powerful holy magic, as the holy law of necromancy, my direct undead subordinates were extremely resistant to the light element. At the beginning of the war, I had the complete upper hand. However, the undead were still undead. No matter how loyal they had lost the intelligence that belonged to humans. Under their unity, the foundation of the glorious era was gradually displayed. When they stabilized their position, under the leadership of the brilliant church, they began to counterattack. At that time, my strength was already very strong, and I could even face the Pope of the brilliant church. But I couldn't guarantee that my undead army would be able to win. In the final battle, my undead army was defeated. Even though the human allied army paid a terrible price, I was still defeated in the end. I was heavily injured by the experts led by the brilliant church's Pope. Then, the Pope cast a vicious weakening curse on me. For the next 1,000 years, I endured the pain of this holy curse. In the end, I had no choice but to give up my body and enter eternal slumber. I lost this war, but my revenge was still a success. Even though I suffered irreparable damage. However, those who harmed me were all killed by my own hands. This included the Pope, Pero, and Fu Luo. I can still clearly remember the moment before I crushed Fu Luo's heart, the pain and struggle in her eyes. I wanted to dig out her heart to see if it was red. Pero was turned into an undead by me in the most painful way possible. I kept him by my side, and used 1,000 years to slowly refine his soul fire. In the end, he was reduced to ashes, never to be reincarnated again. When I first created this Tower of Eternity, it was to nurture my body. Unfortunately, in the end, I couldn't defeat that damned curse. Otherwise, with my cultivation at the time, I wouldn't have died even after 1,000 years, or even 10,000 years. But in reality, the real cause of my eternal slumber wasn't my physical injuries, but my heart. After I killed all my enemies, I realized that there was nothing in this world that I would be reluctant to part with. The people I loved were all dead, and the people I hated were all dead. My heart also became empty. With nothing left to live for, I finally chose to die. I chose to sleep here for eternity. Because I didn't want to remember whether I was right or wrong in the war. Now, it seems that I was wrong. I was really wrong. No matter how I killed them, my loved ones could never come back to life. Not to mention that so many innocent people died because of me. My guilt is irreparable for all eternity. I am a sinner of humanity. At this point, Electrolux looked at Long Houchen and Kair with a sorrowful gaze. I want to thank you. It was you who woke me up, and it was you who freed me from the hatred I once had. I don't know how long I slept for, but everything in the past is just a fleeting cloud. When I really calmed down, I realized that I had committed a heinous crime. You were right, my ability is not worthy of being passed on by you. This legacy of necromancy should disappear forever, or else it will bring disaster to the world sooner or later. I originally thought that in this world, all humans are despicable, shameless, and incorrigible. But after seeing the feelings between you two, I realized that I was wrong. Out of the two of you, one was willing to give up his life for the other, and in order to resurrect the other, he didn't hesitate to dig out his own heart. The other was willing to give up his belief in the light as the son of light for the sake of his lover. Both of you let me see what is true unswerving until death, and what is true life and death. Thank you, it wasn't until the moment I witnessed your feelings that I understood that there is love in this world. Humans aren't completely despicable between each other. Back then, the biggest psychological advantage that supported me to continue my massacre was to kill all the heartless people. There's no point in regretting. After saying all of this, I feel much better. The evil in my heart has finally been purified. Although I will never be able to return to the embrace of the light. But I can finally make a contribution to the light with my sinful body. As he spoke, Electrolux pointed at the coffin in front of him with his right hand. The overflowing deathly aura suddenly burst forth like a geyser. His left hand made a pressing gesture in the direction of Long Houchen and Kai. A layer of golden light shield suddenly appeared around the two of them, and they didn't suffer any impact from the deathly aura. It could be clearly seen that the deathly aura appeared white in the violent surge. Although Long Houchen and Kai only felt it for a moment when the deathly aura burst forth, they could also sense the astonishing purity contained in the deathly aura. Such pure deathly energy had long surpassed the level of a necromancer. It was the result of Electrolux's 1,000 years of purification. Its terrifying power could be said to be the concentration of the essence of Electrolux's cultivation besides the light in his life. The white airflow gathered on Electrolux's slowly raised right hand, and white ribbons of light rotated around his extended right index finger. The fingertip became brighter and brighter, and the dazzling brilliance shone on the entire 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity, turning it white. Electrolux said lightly, "Kair, you went through hardships and finally walked the path to heaven. At that moment, I have already recognized you as my inheritor. Although you have purified my soul and made me understand how dirty my inheritance is, what I am about to give you has nothing to do with necromancy. It is the purest deathly aura that I have condensed in my thousands of years of slumber. You are originally a reincarnated body, and have the innate ability to purify. You are a reincarnated body, so you have an innate ability to purify. Although I can't let you inherit my power, consider this a gift from me to you. Although I can't let you inherit my power, consider this a gift from me to you. The decision that I, Electrolux, have made will definitely be completed. Unless you are willing to abandon Long Houchen and commit suicide, you can only gradually absorb the deathly aura that I have released." The surrounding white light gradually converged, and finally condensed into a crystal-clear white pearl the size of a cherry on Electrolux's fingertip. With a flash of light, the white pearl quietly flew in front of Kair, and the golden skull Eternal Melody also floated out. However, as it floated, the Eternal Melody gradually changed. It was like a ball of liquid that was constantly moving. With a flash of light, this white pearl quietly flew in front of Kair, and the golden skull of the Eternal Melody also floated out. However, in the process of floating, the Eternal Melody gradually changed, as if it was a mass of liquid that was constantly moving. As it moved, it changed continuously, and finally, it became the image of Long Houchen's head, floating in front of Kair. The white deathly aura quietly merged with the Eternal Melody. Instantly, the original golden Eternal Melody shone with white light. Not only was there no deathly aura, but it was also filled with a holy aura. The necklace hung around Kair's neck, and the new Eternal Melody stuck closely to Kair's chest. With a flash of white light, just like before, it quietly embedded itself into her chest. Kair only felt a cool aura emanating from the new Eternal Melody, entering her body and merging with her spiritual power. She didn't need to do anything at all, and her spiritual power was slowly increasing. Electrolux had merged his deathly aura into the Eternal Melody instead of letting her absorb it directly. This was because he was afraid that the amount of energy would be too much for Kair to handle. It was very thoughtful. Seeing the shocked expression on Kair's face, Electrolux smiled slightly and said, "I don't need you to thank me. This is just the first gift I'm giving you. As for the other gift, I'll give it to you at the end. And don't worry, since I'm giving you a gift, I'll naturally let you two be together. Otherwise, no matter how precious the gift is, without him, you won't be happy no matter what I give you." Hearing this, both Long Houchen and Kair couldn't help but reveal looks of surprise. Although Long Houchen hated Electrolux to the core, he really couldn't bear to die. Even if he ignored all other factors, just for the sake of Kair, he couldn't bear to die like this. Electrolux pointed his right hand at the coffin in front of him again. This time, an incomparably pure golden light burst out of the coffin. When this golden light surged out of the coffin, Electrolux's body suddenly became somewhat illusory. It was as if his own soul power had suffered a huge impact. Compared to the previous time when he condensed the energy of death, this time, the golden light that Electrolux condensed was much slower. His expression was also much more serious than before. He even seemed a little unfamiliar with it. Although there was a layer of golden light barrier, Long Houchen could clearly feel that it was extremely pure light elements. Was he stripping away the energy of light that he had accumulated for thousands of years? Long Houchen looked at Electrolux in shock. Although he hated what Electrolux had done in the past, he couldn't help but admire Electrolux's cultivation from the bottom of his heart. Just by relying on his own soul power, Electrolux was able to extract the energy from his body. How strong must one's perception of elemental energy be to be able to do this? Long Houchen asked himself. There was still a huge gap between him and Electrolux's realm. Among the strong people he had met, the strongest were undoubtedly Demon Emperor Feng Xiu and the holy necromancer Electrolux in front of him. In terms of overall spiritual power, perhaps Demon Emperor Feng Xiu was slightly stronger, but he still couldn't compare to Electrolux, who was in his soul form. However, in terms of elemental control, Long Houchen could conclude that Feng Xiu was definitely no match for Electrolux. The stripping of the golden light continued for a full 2 hours before it gradually came to an end. Long Houchen and Kair both understood that what Electrolux was doing now was extremely important to resurrecting Long Houchen. However, they also didn't know what method the once most powerful necromancer would use to restore Long Houchen's lost heart. When the golden light no longer gushed out from the coffin, Electrolux's expression became even more solemn. He pressed his left hand lightly on his forehead, and instantly, a golden light with a golden tail flame seemed to be pulled out from his soul. His movements were very slow, and his expression began to distort, as if he was suffering from great pain. However, his hands were extremely stable, and he continued his movements. Gradually, the speck of golden light was completely pulled out of his soul. When he was done, his originally solid soul body immediately became transparent, much weaker than before. Electrolux's hands began to move at the same time. The golden light in his left hand slowly merged with the large ball of golden light in his right hand. Gorgeous and complicated runes began to appear on his hands, and every movement was extremely fast. These complicated runes rapidly merged with the golden light in front of him, and the golden light also constantly distorted, fluctuated, and even trembled under the effect of these complicated runes. As the runes and the golden light merged, Electrolux's soul form also became more and more transparent. When he inserted the last rune into the golden light, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh. At the same time, he opened his mouth towards the coffin below him and inhaled. Instantly, a dark gray energy rushed out from the coffin and merged with his soul, causing his soul form to become solid again. However, there was an obvious layer of dark gray, and it was filled with evil and ferocious feelings. It was incompatible with the golden light in front of him. Bang, 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 bang. A strange scene appeared. When Electrolux stretched out his hands and let the golden light float towards Long Houchen, there was a strange sound that sounded like a heartbeat coming from the golden light, and it slowly flew in front of Long Houchen. "This is the heart that I reconstructed for you. Under its effect, your flesh and blood will automatically grow a new heart, and it will completely merge with this power. It will become your strongest spiritual aperture in the future, and it will also be the source of all your power. I call it the Heart of Eternity. It can be said that this is the greatest masterpiece of my life." At this point, Electrolux couldn't help but show a strong sense of admiration on his face. It was obvious that he was full of pride for creating this Heart of Eternity. "I know that you hate me, and hate my power even more. Although you won't reject this gift of mine in order to survive and be with Kair, this gift of mine will definitely affect your Heart of Light in the future. Am I right?" Long Houchen didn't say anything, and tacitly agreed with Electrolux's words. That's right, in order to survive, he could accept everything in front of him, even if he had to betray his faith in the light. For Kaer, he was willing to give up everything he had. However, if he really accepted Electrolux's power, or even the power that he extracted from his own body, then, in Long Houchen's heart, there would definitely be obstacles in the future. It would greatly affect his future cultivation. Electrolux said calmly, "It's precisely because of this problem that before you fuse with the heart of eternity, I have to make it clear to you. You can hate me, and you can reject everything about me. But you can't reject the light. You are the son of the light, and it's perfect for you to fuse with the power of the light. You saw what I did just now. What I gave Kaer was the purest aura of death that I've condensed for thousands of years. This aura of death is nothing compared to my original power. But it's better in its purity, and there's no excess power in it. It will only benefit Kaer, and there's no imprint of me in it. The heart of eternity that I condensed for you is the same. I stripped all the light elements out of my body, and turned them into the purest power of the light. Do you know what I stripped from my soul? It's the imprint of me being the son of the light. In other words, what I'm giving you is not my power, but the power of the former son of the light. You can think of it as the purest element and essence that belonged to the light before I fell. As you can see, after stripping these two powers, all I'm left with is the power of death, and all negative energy. These belong to the fall. My fall is not the light's fall. I'm the guilty one, not the light. Go, my heart of eternity. He's the most suitable master for you." As he spoke, Electrolux's eyes flashed, and the golden light suddenly rushed into Long Houchen's chest. Long Houchen only felt an unparalleled heat surge from his chest into his limbs and bones. He almost subconsciously sat cross-legged on the ground, and his entire body turned golden. He had even lost the ability to think. Electrolux stared at Long Houchen for a full 10 minutes before he gradually relaxed. He smiled and said, "I'm still the holy law of necromancy, Calamity Necromancer Electrolux. In this world, no one has a deeper understanding of death and life than me. My heart of eternity has succeeded. In a sense, Long Houchen has replaced me before I fell and continued to live. Perhaps this is the best choice for me. Everything he does for humanity in the future, I'll have a part of it. I hope this will be enough to atone for my sins. Kaer, are you satisfied with what I've done?" After confirming that Long Houchen had begun to fuse with the heart of eternity, Electrolux turned his attention to Kaer. Kaer bowed slightly. "Thank you for your help, Senior." She was different from Long Houchen. She did not have Long Houchen's benevolent and compassionate heart. She only knew that this former sinner of humanity had now saved her lover. She only had gratitude in her heart. Electrolux smiled and said, "Although you can't inherit my necromancy, you've still obtained my power of death. I'm about to leave this world forever, and I'll be purified by your hands. For me, this is the best place to go. Ever since I was blinded by hatred and resentment, I've never been as happy as I am today. I seem to have returned to the days when I was still the child of light. In the final moments of my life and soul, Kaer, will you call me teacher?" Chapter 234. In the last moments of my life and soul, Kaer, will you call me teacher? When Electrolux asked Kaer this question, his face unconsciously revealed a hint of sadness. "Teacher, you!" Kaer almost subconsciously called out. How could she and Long Houchen not be moved by Electrolux's story? Long Houchen was still better off. Electrolux was pitiful, but the mistakes he had committed against humanity were too grave. Although Long Houchen sympathized with him, he would never forgive the sins he had committed against humanity. But Kaer was just a girl after all, and she had gone through such a painful experience when she was young. She felt more sympathy for Electrolux than for Long Houchen. At this moment, she only felt that this once unbelievably powerful necromancer in front of her was so pitiful. She only had sympathy for what he had gone through. Good. Just hearing the word teacher from Kaer, Electrolux's emotions were already fluctuating violently. Good child. Although I am not worthy to be your teacher, hearing you call me that, I am finally comforted. My heart is finally comforted. In my life, Electrolux, have done many great things. But in the end, the thing that makes me feel the most honored is to have a disciple like you. Don't worry, teacher will leave you a big gift. When you return to the human world, no one will be able to bully you. So what if Long Houchen is the son of light? My disciple, Electrolux, will definitely not be worse than him. At this point, Electrolux's pride as the holy law of necromancy and necromancy calamity seemed to have emerged again. He raised his right hand and waved it in Kair's direction. Instantly, the grim reaper scythe in her hand was sucked over. Strangely enough, such a powerful death scythe was the natural enemy of almost all revenants, but now in Electrolux's hands, it was enveloped by a grayish-black power, and its purification power could not be released at all. Looking up at the sky, Electrolux smiled coldly. This Tower of Eternity can be said to be one of the greatest achievements in my life. I didn't expect that after sleeping for so long, it has evolved to such an extent on its own. Trying to escape my control? You underestimate me too much. Kair, I'm going. If you call me teacher, I'll leave this Tower of Eternity to you. It had already evolved to the level of a transcendent artifact. His own intelligence was already connected to the spirit. I will remove all the excessive things from it. From now on, it will be your offensive and defensive weapon. As for the excess energy, after I purify it, you and your companions can absorb it as much as you want. Don't waste it. When the excess energy has been absorbed, you can leave here. Just as he spoke, the Tower of Eternity suddenly trembled violently, and a huge wave of spiritual power suddenly surged violently in all directions. It seemed to be struggling desperately. Electrolux said arrogantly, "Still want to struggle? You are what I created. Do you think that with the wisdom of the Spirit, you can escape my control? As early as when I created you, I had already considered all the possible situations that might occur in the future. Not to mention that you are still a step away from a transcendent artifact. Even if you really become a transcendent artifact, it will still be easy for me to destroy you." His left hand pointed to the sky, and a grayish-black light suddenly came out, piercing the top of the Tower of Eternity. Suddenly, in the coffin under Electrolux, a large cloud of grayish-black fog rushed out and dispersed to the surroundings, and the power of the Tower of Eternity surged more and more. The entire Tower of Eternity shook violently as if there was an earthquake. The screams of countless wraiths turned into shrill howls. It was unknown what Electrolux did, but the vibration of the Tower of Eternity gradually weakened under the injection of the grayish-black airflow. A large cloud of white light began to be stripped from the Tower of Eternity and wandered in the space. Following this, countless streams of grayish-black air started to gather towards Electrolux from all directions like rivers flowing into the sea, and poured into his soul. In just a moment, Electrolux's soul had become as black as ink. Wisdom deprivation, power deprivation, purification, Electrolux's majestic voice echoed in every floor of the Tower of Eternity. Countless wraiths turned into nothingness in the screams of fear. The purest soul power and the various attributes of the stripped elements converged together. The terrifying power of stripping even completely deprived these elements of their own attributes, leaving only the purest energy. As the grayish-black airflow became more and more intense, a grayish-black halo even began to appear around Electrolux's body, and the Tower of Eternity gradually turned into a pure white color, spotless and flawless. The violent vibration gradually turned into a slight tremor, and then there was no more movement. Everything seemed to return to calmness. There was only a large number of white light spots floating in the air that contained surging spiritual power fluctuations, slowly moving rhythmically. Kair could clearly feel that the Tower of Eternity had changed. It became quiet and pure. It seemed that all the negative things, including emotions, had disappeared under the stripping of Electrolux. Moreover, a strange connection appeared in her heart. The connection between the eternal melody that appeared as Long Houchen's portrait and the Tower of Eternity seemed to have become closer. After purification, the Tower of Eternity will be an artifact of both offense and defense. Although I have stripped many of its power and wisdom, but it is still much more powerful than an ordinary artifact. Through the connection between the eternal melody and it will gradually fuse with your soul and become a part of your body. In this way, you will have a life as Long Houchen, who inherited my heart of eternity. Kai Er's eyes showed a complicated look. It could be said that before Long Houchen was killed by the Demon Emperor, she and Electrolux had no interaction. But she never thought that the one who inherited most of Electrolux's power turned out to be herself. Although Electrolux's necromancy was not passed on to her, whether it was the huge death energy contained in the eternal melody or the Tower of Eternity, they were the essence of Electrolux's lifetime of cultivation. Thinking of his lonely life, Kai Er's eyes couldn't help but moisten. She slowly knelt in the direction of Electrolux and called out again, "Teacher." Electrolux smiled. He smiled very happily. It was a kind of joy that came from the heart. He said loudly, "If there is a next life, I don't want to be the son of light anymore. I just want to be an ordinary human. I want to find a pure woman who loves me, marry her, and give birth to our child. I want to live my life peacefully. I have also been glorious, and I have also fallen. And all of this, from the next moment, will return to nothingness. Goodbye, child. Stay by the side of your loved ones. Teacher, I wish you all the best." As he said that, he suddenly turned the scythe of death in his hand, and the huge blade blossomed with thousands of white lights under the injection of the terrifying soul power. The light of purification was even more powerful than the 7 absolutes of death that Kai cast. The blade slashed straight and cut into the coffin under him. Poof! The terrifying light of purification, under the urging of Electrolux's vast sea of soul power, burst out with an unprecedentedly strong light. An ear-piercing tinkling sound was heard, as if something was breaking in the scythe of death. Electrolux's arrogant voice echoed, "So what if you're the god of death? I will break your seal during this purification. Let's see how you will counterattack my disciple. If I wanted to, I would already be a god. Holding the sun and the moon, plucking the stars in this world, there is no me, such a person, ha ha, ha 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 ha." All the darkness and filth gradually dissipated in the pure white light of purification. Only Electrolux's arrogant voice echoed in the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. "Holding the sun and the moon, plucking the stars, in this world there is no such person. How arrogant, how conceited, and how sad! The former son of light, the holy law of necromancy, the necromancer catastrophe, Electrolux, had passed away. But when he left this world forever, there was still one person to send him off." Kai knelt on the ground, tears were already streaming down her face. Compared to men, women were more emotional. At this time, Kai had completely forgotten that this was the necromancer catastrophe that had once dealt a fatal blow to humanity. She only knew that it was this long-dead genius who was left with only his soul that had saved her man. He reconstructed the heart for Long Houchen so that they could continue to be together. Regardless of what Electrolux had done in the past, the current Kai was heartbroken because his soul had flown away and scattered. Electrolux's life was full of ups and downs, but when he turned into nothingness, he seemed unusually happy. In the end, there was still one person who would be sad because of his death. For ordinary people, something that couldn't be more simple, but for him, it was so precious. The purification lasted for a full hour before the whole space gradually calmed down. Only the countless white light spots filled with pure energy were floating in the air. With a soft ding, the Grim Reaper scythe quietly fell to the ground. It also woke up Kai from her sadness. She subconsciously took a step forward and held the Grim Reaper scythe in her hand. Electrolux's soul wasn't the only thing that had vanished. Even the golden coffin had vanished along with it. There wasn't even a trace of her aura left. When Kai held the Grim Reaper scythe in her hand, a strange feeling suddenly spread throughout her body. She only felt that there seemed to be something extra in her life. And this strange feeling came from the Grim Reaper scythe. It was the feeling of flesh and blood, as if this Tower of Eternity was originally a part of her body. The artifact recognized its master. Kai immediately made the most accurate judgment, because she had experienced the same situation once, and that was the feeling when she first fused with the Sword of Samsara. It was just that the Sword of Samsara at that time was much more domineering than the current Tower of Eternity. It was far less gentle. Electrolux, worthy of being a genius among geniuses, fought against the terrifying powerhouse of the entire continent with his own strength. Just by relying on the connection between the Grim Reaper scythe and Kai, he completed the recognition of the Tower of Eternity and Kai as its master. It was completely imaginable how powerful Electrolux was when he was alive. Perhaps even the Demon Emperor was inferior to him. The Grim Reaper scythe also seemed to have some strange changes with the purification of Electrolux. The original dark body emitted a magical blue, magical purple color under the reflection of the surrounding white, less domineering, but more strange and arrogant. Holding the death god's scythe in her hand, Kai stood there for a long time, not saying a word. In her heart, Electrolux's story, as well as his overflowing arrogance before he left, kept reverberating. "Teacher," Kai murmured. In the next moment, she turned to Long Houchen, who was sitting cross-legged there and had already entered deep meditation. A faint golden light emitted from Long Houchen's chest, spread to every corner of his body, and then slowly retracted. His whole person had been immersed in this meditation, but his breath of life had been completely stabilized. There was no doubt that Electrolux's action had completely resurrected him. The magic belonging to the necromancer could not help but be breathtaking. Instead of immediately sitting down next to Long Houchen, Kai moved her mind, and in the next moment, she had already returned to the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity. Now that she was the master of this place, no matter how she controlled the Tower of Eternity, she only needed to use her own will. The glimmer of dawn monster hunters, who had long been shocked by the changes around them, were waiting with difficulty. Although the white light spots in the air were full of pure energy, this was the Tower of Eternity. Before knowing exactly what had happened, they did not dare to rashly absorb it. What's more, for them, the safety of Long Houchen and Kai was more important. Their lives were uncertain, so how could they calm down and cultivate? Kai. The sudden appearance of Kai suddenly caused everyone to cheer in surprise. Wang Yuan was the first to rush forward and hug her. The others also gathered around. Chen Yinger hugged Kai and burst into tears. The scene of Kai climbing the path to heaven left a deep imprint in their hearts. It was no longer a simple emotion. They could never forget the scene of the 3 bloodstains spreading on the path to heaven, and they could never forget Kai's blood-colored dress. Being hugged by Wang Yuan and Chen Yinger, feeling the burning and concerned eyes of her companions, Kai was no longer as cold as before. She said softly, "I'm fine, I've made everyone worry." Lin Xin asked eagerly, "What about the leader?" They did not see Long Houchen behind Kai. Kai smiled and said, "He's fine." As soon as this statement came out, everyone was stunned for a few seconds. Then, cheers suddenly rang through the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity. Although when Kai first appeared, they had a premonition that Long Houchen was safe. Otherwise, Kai would not have looked so relaxed, nor would she have brought Long Houchen's corpse with her. But when she personally said that Long Houchen was safe, everyone's suppressed emotions could not help but erupt like a volcano. This group of young human geniuses, at this time, were like excited children, jumping and jumping. Their leader had miraculously been resurrected, their light of dawn had a soul and a spiritual pillar again. Moreover, they had welcomed back their best brother. Kai-Er's tears flowed unconsciously. Thank you, thank you. To have a group of brothers and sisters like you, Long Houchen and I are the luckiest. Cherninger cried and laughed at the same time. Kai-Er, you're wrong. We're a whole, don't leave you and the boss out. That's great, that's really great. Sima Xian put an arm around Lin Xian's neck and asked Kai-Er curiously, Tell me, how did you resurrect? So it's really possible to resurrect after death. This necromancy is really amazing. Of course, Kai-Er wanted to share the process of Long Houchen's resurrection with her companions, so she told them in detail everything that happened after she climbed the path to heaven. Listening to Electrolux's tragic experience, the originally excited group gradually calmed down. This holy law of necromancy, Calamity Necromancer Electrolux's experience was really too tragic. A feeling of sympathy unconsciously appeared in their hearts. Kai-Er sighed softly. Teacher finally came to his senses. He purified himself, and also purified all of his sins. No matter what, he will always be my teacher. The pure energy left in the Tower of Eternity is the result of teacher's purification and the wisdom of the Tower of Eternity being erased by teacher. It's all the purest power. Everyone, do your best to absorb it. Let's stay here for the time being. Until all of this energy is converted into our spiritual power. The energy released in the process of a supreme artifact being reduced to a divine artifact should be able to lead our cultivation to great progress. The mission to ambush Star Demon in Modu failed, and they almost lost their leader. Coming to the Tower of Eternity, they experienced countless difficulties and obstacles before finally resurrecting Long Houchen. Now the opportunity to improve had finally arrived. Kai-Er waved her sleeves and a white light flashed. The next moment, everyone had appeared on the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. The 7th floor was the core of the Tower of Eternity, and all of the energy could be drawn here. Moreover, Kai-Er also wanted to let her companions witness the resurrection of Long Houchen. When everyone saw Long Houchen sitting there quietly cultivating, they could no longer cheer, and tears flowed down at the same time. The light of dawn was finally reunited. They sat cross-legged around Long Houchen, and with great difficulty, they calmed down and began to cultivate. The meditation had just begun, but everyone was already deeply shocked by what they saw. Those seemingly soft white light spots, as soon as they were absorbed into their bodies, they immediately underwent a drastic change. No matter what kind of spiritual power the pure energy was fused with, the fusion process could be completed in the shortest time, and there was no need to go through the process of eliminating impurities. Everyone's spiritual power increased at an alarming rate during this absorption process. Different from everyone else was Kai-Er. Kai-Er not only absorbed the pure energy in the Tower of Eternity, but also the pure death energy left by Electrolux in the eternal melody in her chest. The god of death could also be called the god of purification. The power of the god of death came from the purification of vengeful spirit. In this world, it could be said that there was no vengeful spirit more powerful than Electrolux. When Electrolux used the scythe of the god of purification to purify himself, it even led to the scythe of the god of death's evolution. However, the scythe of the god of death itself was one with Kai-Er. After Kai-Er took it back, the moment she started cultivating, the scythe of the god of death immediately fed back to Kai-Er. A huge amount of purification power poured into Kai-Er's body, merged with her own spiritual power, and absorbed the death energy in the eternal melody and the pure energy in the Tower of Eternity. Almost in an instant, Kai-Er's internal spiritual power was pushed to the peak of the 7th rank. Kai-Er's experience was rich enough, and the foundation she had accumulated was long enough. She didn't need to do anything herself. After the 3 spiritual orifices on her chest, forehead, and lower abdomen were completely filled, a spiritual orifice appeared on her shoulders and thighs, increasing the number of spiritual orifices to 7. The huge amount of spiritual power that was far from being fully absorbed suddenly swarmed in at an alarming rate, and was injected into these 4 new spiritual orifices. From this moment on, Kai-Er's cultivation was officially promoted to the 8th rank. Although the speed of improvement of others wasn't as fast as Kai-Er's, compared to their usual cultivation speed, it was already amazing enough. Almost every circulation of spiritual power, there would be an increase. This feeling was really too exciting. Everyone knew that this kind of opportunity might only come once in a lifetime, so naturally they would do their best. In particular, Duan Yi and Yang Wenjiao, who knew that there was a huge gap between them and the Light of Dawn monster hunters, were even more desperate in their cultivation. For a moment, the Tower of Eternity was completely quiet. Because of this silence, everyone was immersed in their own cultivation. No one saw that Long Haochen's body also began to show strange changes. The Heart of Eternity entered his body and filled the position of Long Haochen's heart. The huge amount of light elements softly and gently repeated the process of spreading and condensing in his body. When Long Haochen's heart was shattered by the Demon Emperor, in fact, the core spiritual orifice in his chest was also shattered. At that time, even if he could survive, his cultivation could be said to be crippled. After the Heart of Eternity was injected, it immediately became the core to communicate with the other spiritual orifices in his body. In the expansion of the huge amount of light elements, it quickly established a connection with the other spiritual orifices and communicated with them all. In this way, the light elements could smoothly flow in Long Haochen's body and restore his original cultivation. This process of recovery was extremely fast, and just as Kai-Er told her companions about the process, it was already completed. When Long Haochen's spiritual power was restored to above the 8th rank, his body began to produce strange changes. The Heart of Eternity was actually an extremely pure mass of light elements, and its core was originally Electrolux, son of light bloodline. Long Haochen himself was a son of light, and when he fused with the Son of Light bloodline from thousands of years ago, there was still a short period of rejection during this process. In terms of bloodline power, Long Haochen was much stronger than Electrolux. After all, Electrolux had died thousands of years ago. Perhaps his spiritual power had not dissipated, and his soul power was incomparably strong. But his bloodline had long since dried up. What he had extracted was only the most essential part of the bloodline. Thus, after a short period of rejection and collision, Long Haochen's own bloodline power was completely stimulated, and this pure bloodline power was fused into his own body. In this situation, Electrolux's powerful ability showed itself. After the bloodline fusion was completed, a large amount of muscle tissue began to undulate in Long Haochen's chest. A brand new heart was in the process of growing. The numbness and itchiness spread throughout Long Haochen's body, and also woke him up from his almost unconscious state. Long Haochen quickly discovered the changes in his body. The numbness and itchiness from his chest was simply more intense than any pain. But he gritted his teeth and bitterly endured it. He knew that this was a crucial moment for him. Reconstructing the heart, he had never even heard of it. Even the most powerful light-type forbidden spell, the resurrection spell, could only be completed when the body was intact. But Electrolux did it, and this miracle was happening on his body. If he gave up halfway at this time because he could not endure the numbness and itchiness, then even if all the gods descended, he was afraid that his life would not be able to be saved. For Kai-Er, for his family, and for all his companions, how could Long Haochen let this happen? Sitting there cross-legged, his body was soaked in sweat in a few short seconds, but he still did not move, and did not even make a sound. He could feel that Kai-Er was not far away from him, and the more it was like this, the more he could not let Kai-Er feel the pain that he was suffering. She had sacrificed too much for him, and suffered too much. Long Haochen really did not want her to worry about him anymore. Reconstructing the heart was definitely a complicated process, and throughout the whole process, Long Houchen's spiritual power was constantly increasing. Although his body was suffering extreme pain, Long Houchen also realized that during the process of reconstructing his heart, there was an obvious difference from before. He was not a doctor, nor was he a priest, so naturally, he did not know much about the structure of the heart. But even if he did not know much, if he looked into Long Houchen's body, he would be able to clearly feel that everything was different. The most direct manifestation of this difference was in the color. The human heart was supposed to be red, and even when spiritual power was circulating, the spiritual power could only protect the area around the heart. The first spiritual aperture of the various professions appeared in the middle of the chest, which was actually where the heart was protected. However, during the process of reconstructing Long Houchen's heart, it was completely different. He clearly felt that his flesh and blood were growing, but the growing flesh and blood were completely golden, and there was no red at all. Moreover, when the heart was growing, the spiritual power freely flowed out and completely fused with the flesh and blood. There was a saying in the description of human beings, a heart of gold. And now, Long Houchen had made this saying a reality. His heart was being reconstructed in this golden color. Although Long Houchen did not know what kind of changes such a heart would bring, he had no choice. Before he fainted, he heard what Electrolux said, and he also understood that Electrolux was doing this for his own good. He was afraid that he would have a psychological burden that would affect his future advancement. Even a hateful person had a pitiful side. Long Houchen could not, and did not have the right to, forgive Electrolux for the sake of humanity. His sins were too heavy. However, when he and Kyre listened to Electrolux's story, in Long Houchen's heart, he sympathized with him. At least for him, Electrolux was of great help and gave him a second life. Therefore, when Long Houchen woke up, he subconsciously said thank you to Electrolux in his heart. The pain of the heart remodeling was getting more and more intense, and Long Houchen's willpower was undergoing a huge test. Although it was different from when Kyre climbed the path to heaven. But in terms of physical pain, he had to endure a little more. And Kyre mainly suffered from mental torture at that time. Long Houchen unyieldingly withstood this pain. He only had one thought in his mind, for Kyre. In less than a day, all the members of Light of Dawn Monster Hunters, except for Long Houchen, entered deep meditation. The energy in the Tower of Eternity was too pure and too huge. Only by entering deep meditation could they better absorb it and understand everything about themselves. This feeling was very wonderful. Such an opportunity could be said to be blessed by heaven. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. It could be clearly seen that Long Houchen's original clothes had all turned black. Under the effect of the white energy in the Tower of Eternity, his clothes were constantly breaking. Every time it broke, it would be purified by this pure energy. Long Houchen was also moving towards an awkward situation where he was completely naked. This black color was entirely his own sweat, the impurities in his body, and the dark corrosion left by the Demon Emperor's finger on his body were all discharged in this process. More importantly, although Long Houchen experienced great pain, the golden light in front of his chest was becoming stronger and stronger. Yes, his heart remodeling was about to be completed. After 3 days of torture, Long Houchen's consciousness was already a little fuzzy, but he had been gritting his teeth and holding on. He had to face all this with a clear mind. Otherwise, no one knew what would happen after he passed out. Moreover, with such an obvious change in his heart, if he couldn't witness the entire process of its remodeling, Long Houchen would definitely encounter a lot of trouble in his future cultivation. Soon, the whole body of the heart was completed, and the golden blood vessels inside were also slightly fluctuating as they completed their dredging. Long Houchen knew that the most important part of the entire remodeling process was about to come. Only when this remodeled heart began its normal work would he be considered to be completely resurrected. Faced with such a situation, Long Houchen's heart was also perturbed. He was not afraid of death, but he was not willing to die. Remodeling the heart, this was absolutely unprecedented for humans. Could it be successful? Could the heart of eternity really be condensed? Long Houchen had no confidence at all. The difference between the golden heart and the other organs in the body was too obvious. Could such a heart really emit the vitality of life like his original heart? No one could answer this question of Long Houchen, including the departed Electrolux. If Electrolux was still alive, he would definitely be more confident than Long Houchen. However, he would not be 100% confident. Just as Long Houchen's heart was about to be completely remodeled and enter the recovery process. In another world of black and red. A huge body trembled slightly. The scales had long lost their luster, and the huge body had been lying there for a long time. Around its body there was dark purple blood, and this blood was flowing from its 6 big mouths and noses. It had been in this state for a while. Its vitality had originally completely disappeared. However, at this moment it actually trembled slightly. A trace of vitality quietly appeared on its body. This fluctuation of vitality first appeared on its scales. The scales had originally lost their luster and were as black as ink, but just now, a small scale on its back suddenly emitted a bright purple light. The amethyst light gradually appeared, and this was the main reason why its body trembled. Yes, it was Haoyue. After Long Houchen was killed, Haoyue also lost its vitality. However, just like how Long Houchen's soul did not dissipate with the help of Yi Xiaolei, Haoyue still maintained a trace of hope of resurrection. In fact, even if Long Houchen's soul dissipated, Haoyue's real death would still go through a process. With every additional head, its life would become more tenacious. Now that it had 6 heads, even if its bloodline dried up and it died, its body would still not rot for 36 days, and there was still a chance for it to come back to life. This was the advantage of bloodline. Moreover, although Long Houchen's body died of exhaustion, his soul did not dissipate. Therefore, Haoyue still had a trace of vitality left. A scale lit up, like a spark that ignited a prairie. Gradually, one scale after another began to shine brightly. What was even more strange was that the dark purple blood on the ground seemed to be dyed by the purple color of the scale, and gradually began to emit a slight energy fluctuation. Spots of purple light gradually separated from the dark purple blood, floated in the air, and landed on Haoyue's body. Long Houchen's body suddenly stiffened. The last blood vessel in his heart was about to be unblocked, and the decisive moment had finally arrived. The blood and spiritual energy quietly penetrated the final barrier, and Long Houchen's body suddenly spasmed violently. His consciousness was completely locked on his heart, and because of his nervousness, his body involuntarily spasmed slightly. When the last blood vessel was unblocked, the golden heart also contracted violently. The golden tightness also tightened, and also tightened on Long Houchen's soul. One could clearly see a layer of golden light spreading from the tightened heart. But this time, it wasn't simply spreading and withdrawing. It was embellishing. Long Houchen only felt that at this moment, everything in his body was dyed gold, and the next moment, the golden heart finally expanded again. Thump thump, thump thump. Chapter 235. Thump thump, thump thump, what a beautiful sound it was. Only those who had truly lost it would know how precious the sound of a heartbeat was. The moment the heartbeat reappeared, Long Houchen's soul almost froze. It was also at this moment with the powerful heartbeat. The spiritual power in Long Houchen's body was like a geyser, flowing from the heart to the rest of his body. The heart forcefully contracted, expanded, contracted again, and expanded again. A powerful feeling of power instantly spread throughout Long Houchen's body. Not only the internal spiritual power, but even the external spiritual power was also integrated into this powerful feeling. Long Houchen was shocked to find that his heart of eternity, in the process of contracting and expanding, had actually absorbed all the spiritual power in his body into the heart and then released it all. It must be noted that Long Houchen's original spiritual power was already as high as 50,000. In other words, the Heart of Eternity could actually carry as much as 50,000 internal spiritual power. Moreover, this seemed to be far from enough to satisfy its appetite. How was this possible? The heart could carry spiritual power, and it was much more than the spiritual aperture could. In the past, this was something that Long Houchen would never have imagined. But at this moment, this powerful state was right in front of him. Thump, 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 the heart contracted, and the spiritual power was squeezed out. The spiritual power in the other spiritual apertures in his body had all been extracted by the heart, so it naturally needed to absorb energy from the outside world to replenish it. Immediately, Long Houchen discovered that his blood vessels, meridians, and even internal organs were all dyed golden by the pure spiritual power in the powerful heartbeat. At this moment, the light attribute in his body could no longer be described as pure. Although the spiritual power seemed to be in a liquid state, Long Houchen felt that it was completely solid. The integration of the two Son of Light constitutions had caused Long Houchen's innate internal spiritual power to exceed its original limit. If there was really a device that could measure his current innate internal spiritual power, then it would definitely be terrifying to find that the strength of his innate internal spiritual power was definitely more than 120%. In other words, Long Houchen was no longer a Son of Light constitution, but a pure God of Light constitution. The purity of his own light element was already no different from the power of descent brought by the Goddess of Light. In this world, it was impossible for anyone to compare to him in terms of the purity of the light attribute. The beating of his heart caused Long Houchen's body to become like a huge black hole. Every time his heart beat, the huge amount of spiritual energy around him would be emptied. At the same time, the Heart of Eternity itself would also be squeezed out a large amount of light element to replenish Long Houchen's body. It was precisely because of this that his frenzied absorption did not affect his companions who were cultivating around him. The Heart of Eternity contained all the light attribute essence of Electrolux. Before the heart was reconstructed, it was just quietly deposited there. Now that Long Houchen had finally completed the resurrection process, the light essence began to play its powerful role. In just a short while, Long Houchen was surprised to find that the changes in his body had once again exceeded his understanding. During the absorption process just now, he was shocked to find that the internal spiritual energy in his body had exceeded 100,000. That's right, it was 100,000, which symbolized the rank 9. In other words, he should be a rank 9 powerhouse now. But in fact, he did not feel like he had broken through at all. His realm should still be at the rank 8. 100,000 spiritual energy was only enough to fill his Heart of Eternity. And the other spiritual acupoints in his body were still empty, rapidly absorbing spiritual energy in the pulsation of the Heart of Eternity. What was going on? Why did my spiritual energy exceed 100,000, but not advance to the rank 9? Long Houchen did not have the time to be happy about the improvement of his spiritual energy. He was shocked by the strange changes in his body. This was completely beyond common sense. Even for demons, 100,000 spiritual energy was rank 9. But now, he had clearly exceeded 100,000, but he was still in the rank 8 realm. With Long Houchen's intelligence, he quickly found the problem. Breaking through from the rank 8 to the rank 9 was also the process of breaking through from 9 spiritual acupoints to 10. 9 was the extreme number. Only after breaking through 9 spiritual acupoints would one enter another level, which was to break through to the rank 9. And although his internal spiritual energy had exceeded 100,000 by right, he should have broken through 9 spiritual acupoints. But in fact, his spiritual acupoints did not break through, only his spiritual energy broke through. And all these strange things were because of the Heart of Eternity. The Heart of Eternity was equivalent to replacing the original spiritual acupoint in his chest, and it produced a much greater effect than the original spiritual acupoint. And the total number of spiritual acupoints in Long Houchen's body did not exceed 9. This was the key reason why he did not break through to the rank 9 realm. Chest, head, abdomen, shoulders, and groin, these were a total of 7 spiritual acupoints. These were originally built by Long Houchen. Normally, his cultivation could only increase to 70,000 spiritual energy at most, and he would need to continue to open spiritual acupoints to advance. But the appearance of the Heart of Eternity broke this limit. Although the Heart of Eternity replaced the original spiritual acupoints, its storage capacity was not 10,000, but 100,000. This meant that Long Houchen's body's capacity for spiritual energy had increased from 70,000 to 160,000. Hence, although his spiritual energy had improved, his rank 9 realm did not. One could imagine how terrifying it would be for a rank 8 powerhouse to have 160,000 spiritual energy. Furthermore, when Long Houchen's Heart of Eternity was beating, his spiritual energy output was at the 160,000 level. This meant that he was in the rank 8 realm, but his strength was a true rank 9. It was just that he lacked the special abilities of a rank 9 powerhouse. In terms of spiritual energy usage and outburst, he was even more powerful than a rank 9 powerhouse with the same amount of spiritual energy. The Heart of Eternity that Electrolux helped him reconstruct was too powerful. Once Long Houchen could fill up all his spiritual acupoints, his strength would at least double from before. And this was under the condition that he did not continue to cultivate. And with this Heart of Eternity, Long Houchen's absorption of spiritual energy would be much faster than ordinary rank 8 powerhouses. As long as he could continue to build spiritual acupoints, it would not take long for him to break through to rank 9. Following the recovery of Long Houchen's heart, the consumption of the pure energy in the Tower of Eternity increased significantly. At this time, the rest of the people had almost reached a bottleneck in their cultivation. With such a huge amount of pure energy to absorb, it did not take long for them to reach the bottleneck brought about by the spiritual acupoints. The improvement of spiritual energy could be achieved by absorbing the pure energy here, but the establishment of spiritual acupoints could not be achieved. They could only rely on their own understanding of spiritual energy and the improvement of their strength. Hence, the rapid improvement of their cultivation had started to slow down. But no matter what, in this Tower of Eternity, their cultivation speed was much faster than in the outside world. And the pure energy that they absorbed was only a small portion. Roar dash, the recovery of Long Houchen's heart also represented the beating of another powerhouse's heart. Thump 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 in the violent and powerful heartbeat, the purple light was like a prairie fire spreading to every scale. The purple blood on the ground had completely disappeared, and the 6 big heads and 12 eyes were all rippling with a strong purple color. The cold and awe-inspiring roar seemed to express the anger in its heart. Yes, Long Haoyue was awake, and in the process of waking up, its body began to fluctuate violently, and the huge power of the bloodline was operating rapidly. 6 big heads, 6 pairs of eyes were completely rippling with madness. It was full of the aura of destruction. At this point, the Demon Emperor's plan for Long Houchen had completely failed. 4 years later. Jiaoling Pass, Magic Temple. Silly girl, don't continue to wait. It's been more than 4 years, and there's no news. I'm afraid they. An old magician wearing a luxurious fiery red magic robe tried to persuade them with good intentions. In front of him was a woman in a tight outfit. This woman had long pink hair and looked to be in her 20s. Her appearance was very beautiful, and her eyes were far more profound than ordinary people. Her body was faintly emitting a strong spiritual fluctuation. At this time, her eyes showed a firm and persistent brilliance. Grandpa Lin, don't persuade me. I will not leave the magic temple until I get the exact news of their death. Don't tell me you don't want me anymore? The old magician's eyes flashed with tears. Xian, you are really a good girl. Lin Xian, that little bastard was able to find such a good girl like you is his greatest blessing. It's just that he didn't have the fortune to enjoy this blessing. The Holy War ended 4 years ago, and the demons withdrew. If they were still alive, it's impossible for them to not return for such a long time. The demons' withdrawal is even more inexplicable. Xian, I also don't want to believe that they are dead, but I can't delay your life like this. You are still young. If you delay like this, it will affect your lifelong happiness. Of course, Grandpa Lin is willing to let you stay in the magic temple to accompany me. Compared to that little bastard, you are more like my granddaughter. But Grandpa Lin can't be so selfish. I can't affect your future happiness for my own sake. That's right, this old magician was Lin Xian's grandfather, the magic temple's deputy temple master Lin Chen. The girl in front of him was Lin Xian, the Rose of Hell. Although Lin Xian was a knight, she had a great reputation in Jialing Pass, and was loved and respected by the soldiers of Jialing Pass. On the battlefield, she always took the lead and was injured many times during the battle. After Lin Xian left, she stayed here and fought with her monster hunters. Just before the end of the Holy War, the leader of her monster hunters, Lu Shi, was killed in a sneak attack by the enemy. The monster hunters disbanded. After the Holy War ended, the other members dispersed and returned to their own temple. Only Lin Xian stayed. She wanted to wait for Lin Xian's return. For the past 4 years, she had stayed in the magic temple to train and accompany Lin Chen. She was filial to Lin Xian. Lin Chen had tried to persuade Lin Xian many times, but she still did what she had to do. She refused to leave. Lin Chen loved this girl who was supposed to be his granddaughter-in-law, but he couldn't be so selfish. Lin Xian had been missing for more than 4 years. The last time he appeared was at the Spirit Temple, Wanshou Pass. After such a long time, the chances of them surviving in the depths of the devil race were really too low. No matter how unwilling Lin Chen was to admit it, he didn't want to delay Lin Xian's future. Grandpa Lin, don't say any more. I won't leave. I want to wait for him and Haochen. They will definitely come back. Tears welled up in Lin Xian's eyes. No matter how strong she was, she still had a weak side. Of course, she knew that the chances of Lin Xian and the others surviving were very low. However, even if there was only a sliver of chance, Lin Xian would not admit that they were dead until she saw their corpses. Sigh, you silly girl. Alright, you can stay for now. In a few days, we will set off for the Holy City to participate in the temple tournament that's held once every 10 years. After the temple tournament, you have to go home no matter what. I know that your father has written to me many times. Lin Xian nodded silently. That's right. Even if she insisted on waiting for Lin Xian and Long Haochen to return, it was time for her to go home. Lin Chen smiled and said, Xian, you've already broken through to the 8th level and have rich battle experience. The swords that Grandpa custom-made for you will arrive soon. After the temple tournament, do you have the confidence to challenge the adamantine foundation of the Knights Templars? Lin Xian was no longer the Lin Xian of the past. After 4 years of dedicated cultivation, she had broken through the bottleneck of the 7th level and the 8th level. She was now a level 1 expert of the 8th level. The demon hunters who survived the Holy War had made great progress in their cultivation. She was now a Mithril Foundation Knight. Although it was still difficult for her to challenge the Adamantine Foundation, Lin Chen had custom-made a pair of epic-tier heavy swords for her. This was originally the wealth that Lin Chen had prepared for his only grandson. Since Lin Xian had not returned, he had given this precious gift to Lin Xian. The Holy War back then had brought a great disaster to the Temple League. In that war that lasted for 2 years, who knew how many soldiers of the Temple League had perished at the 6 impregnable passes? But at the same time, the demons had also suffered heavy losses in that holy war. It had been 4 years since the holy war ended. In these 4 years, the advantages that the Temple League had accumulated over thousands of years had begun to show. Although the sharp decline in population could not be recovered in a short period of time, other aspects had recovered very quickly. Especially after the Holy War, all the experts of the 6 Great Temple who had survived had a qualitative leap in their strength. Situations like Lin Xian's were very common. After 2 years of the Holy War and 4 years of consolidation, compared to before the Holy War, the number of experts in the Temple League now even exceeded that of the past. It was just that the number of ordinary soldiers was much less than before. The Temple Tournament was about to begin. This was a major event that was held once every 10 years in the Alliance. The strongest experts of the 6 Great Temple would exchange pointers with each other in this grand event. At the same time, a new ranking would also be made. Almost all the higher-ups of the 6 Great Temple knew that this Temple Tournament was of great significance. As the first Temple Tournament after the Holy War, not only would there be a new ranking, but there would also be many decisions to be made. The 2 years of the Holy War had consumed a lot of the Alliance's resources, but at the same time, the demon's strength had also been greatly reduced. Even 2 of the demon god pillars had been destroyed. The Temple League was like a sharp sword that had been sharpened by the demons, becoming sharper and sharper. After the Holy War, humans did not fall into the decline that the demon emperor had expected. Instead, they seemed to be thriving. Although compared to the overall strength of the demons, it seemed that the Temple League still had a gap. However, the difference wasn't that great. Once the younger generation that had experienced the Holy War had fully grown, it was hard to say how long the demons could suppress the Temple League. In order to ensure the demons' advantage, the demon emperor had devoted all of his efforts to the development of the eastern and southern seas in the past few years. Although there were also demonic beasts in the sea, there was more food there. Food with high nutritional value played an extremely important role in enhancing the strength of the demons. The demons had never lacked strong experts. Instead of robbing humans and obtaining a pitiful amount of food, it was better to turn to the sea and obtain more from the depths of the sea. This matter was now presided over by the moon demon, Agars. This showed how much importance the demon emperor attached to this matter. The Temple Tournament was about to begin. The tournament was not just a simple battle. As the most important event of the Temple League, the Temple Tournament was a comprehensive competition. Finally, the tournament would be ranked according to the total points of each temple. Although this kind of competition could not be completely fair, after so many years of development, the Temple League had tried its best to make the Temple Tournament as fair as possible. As a Mithril Foundation Knight, Lin Xian would naturally represent the Knights Templars in the tournament. Hearing Lin Chen ask her if she wanted to become a knight on a golden pedestal, Lin Xian could not help but smile and shake her head. She said, "Grandpa Lin, I'm still far from that. There are many talented people in the Alliance. Our Knights Templars also have a batch of young experts. There are only a few sets of golden pedestal armor available. I don't want to compete with them. Let's talk about it when I have enough strength." Lin Chen said proudly, "What do you mean you don't have enough strength? Wait until I finish forging the Vulcan dual swords for you. It might not be impossible for you to challenge a 9th-grade beginner. I think you should take advantage of this time's Temple Tournament to win a set of golden pedestal armor." Lin Xian was silent. Lin Chen looked at her expression and naturally knew what she was thinking. "Silly girl, are you still not willing to accept it? Although you are not my biological granddaughter, in my eyes, you are much stronger than that brat Lin Xian. Not to mention the fact that there is no news of him, even if he comes back alive. I will not leave my assets to that unfilial little bastard. If you still recognize me as your grandpa, don't push it away anymore. Otherwise, Grandpa Lin will really be angry. Don't tell me that you want me to bring my things into my coffin? Moreover, I have already forged the Night Heavy Sword. What's the point of me keeping it? Lin Xian's eyes were slightly red. Grandpa Lin, you are so good to me. Lin Chen smiled and said, Don't tell me you don't treat your grandfather well? Don't think too much. You have to work hard during this period of time and strive to perform well in the temple tournament. This time's tournament is different from the previous ones. Because of the Holy War 4 years ago, I'm afraid there will be many variables in this tournament. At the same time, it is also a great opportunity for the Alliance. Lin Xian's heart skipped a beat and she nodded lightly. Lin Chen was one of the upper echelons of the Magic Temple, but she belonged to the Knights Templars after all. Therefore, there were many things that Lin Chen could not say directly. He could only subtly remind her. But with her intelligence, this was enough. Holy City. This was a simple wooden house. The entire structure was made of wood. All the tables and chairs in the house were made of the simplest wooden structure. However, these pieces of wood were very special. There were beautiful wood grains on them, and they gave off a faint osmanthus fragrance. This type of wood was called falling fragrance wood. It was an extremely precious wood. The aura it gave off was very beneficial to the human body. It could prolong one's life and at the same time, it could refresh one's mind. Behind a simple wooden table sat a young girl quietly. The young girl wore a white dress and her pure face was flawless. However, there was a faint sadness in her eyes. On the wooden table in front of her, there was a pile of scarlet fragments. From the shape of the fragments it could be seen that when they were complete they should have been in the shape of a ball. It's been 4 years. Damn Baldy, you bastard. Why haven't I heard from you? The scarlet dragon pearl is broken, and your scarlet dragon armor is broken. But do you know that I'm still waiting for you? I believe that you're still alive. You must still be alive, right? As she spoke, a light purple pearl appeared in her palm out of thin air. The aura this pearl emitted was very strange. There was a faint electric snake circling around it. Although the spiritual energy wave was not strong, it was enough to show its uniqueness. It's been 4 years. You must still be alive. But where are you? Why haven't you come back after so long? Do you know how much I— At this point, 2 drops of tears rolled down her cheeks. They landed on the table and created a slight splash. In the past few months, the Holy City had been especially lively. This was because the Grand Temple Tournament that was held once every 10 years was about to begin. If the Monster Hunters Tournament was a grand event for the younger generation, then the Temple Tournament was the grandest and most important event in the entire Temple League. The Alliance was busy making arrangements for this tournament. Apart from some powerhouses who stayed at the front line, most of the powerhouses from the 6 temples had gathered in the Sanctuary Alliance to make preparations for this temple tournament. Many elders of the Alliance who usually lived in seclusion had also come to the Holy City. Although there were still a few days before the temple tournament, the Temple League headquarters had been holding meetings every day. The higher-ups of the 6 temples had been discussing all sorts of matters. As for what they were discussing, that was the top secret of the Temple League. Only the higher-ups who were participating in the meeting knew. Those with sharp senses would notice that this temple tournament was different from the previous ones. The atmosphere was obviously much more tense. Obviously, something big was about to happen. In a quiet room, 2 old men sat facing each other quietly. Both of them looked very serious, causing the atmosphere in the quiet room to be a little depressing. If someone familiar with the higher-ups of the Temple League was here, they would be surprised to recognize that the 2 of them were influential figures in the Temple League. The 2 temple masters of the Knights Templars, Yang Haohan and Long Tianin. Yang Haohan was not only the temple master of the Knights Templars, but he was also the Alliance master of the Temple League. Of course, his term of office as the Alliance master would come to an end at the beginning of this temple tournament. According to the rules of the Alliance master could not be reappointed. In other words, this time, Yang Haohan would have to step down as the Alliance master. Brother Long, this time we can only rely on you. Sigh. Yang Haohan let out a long sigh. He looked a little lonely. Long Tianyin frowned. I'm afraid the situation will change this time. I'm afraid that our Knights Templars. Yang Haohan naturally knew what he wanted to say. He smiled bitterly. What can we do? In the past 10 years, the most outstanding talents emerged from the younger generation was our Knights Templars. However, in that holy war we also suffered the greatest loss. Although Xingyu has returned, I don't know why, but he is only willing to stay in the dragon-resisting mountain pass to guard it. No matter what, he is unwilling to participate in this tournament. I can only trouble you. Long Tianyin snorted coldly. Don't mention that unfilial thing. He has this gloomy face all day long. No one knows what he is thinking. Yang Haohan comforted. Don't blame Xingyu. Haochen has been missing for so long, how could he not be worried? Mentioning the 2 words Haochen, the too powerful Knight of the Seal couldn't help but fall silent. That's right. Ever since Long Haochen left the dragon-resisting mountain pass with Han Yu, they have disappeared for more than 4 years. The last time they appeared was in the Soul Temple. After that, there was no more news. For this matter, Long Tianyin and Yang Haohan had personally gone to the Soul Temple to inquire about the news. Long Tianyin fiercely slapped the table in front of him. He said regretfully, "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have agreed to let him reorganize the monster hunters. If he had stayed in the dragon-resisting mountain pass, how could we be so passive now? More than 4 years ago, he had already broken through to the 8th Order. In these 4 years, even reaching the 9th Order is not impossible. He is the Son of Light, a God's chosen one. Even if his cultivation is a bit weak, if he can obtain the recognition of the eternal and creator throne of God, this time's temple tournament will definitely be able to shine. How could he make things difficult for us 2 old fellows here?" Yang Haohan's expression was gloomy. This matter started because of Wen Zhao. If not for saving Wen Zhao, they wouldn't have disappeared. We have used all kinds of methods to inquire about the news, but have never found anything. But I still don't believe that they were really harmed by the demons. Long Tianyin's eyes revealed a deep sadness. Who would be willing to believe it? The most outstanding talents of our Knights Templars' younger generation have all disappeared. Now we are in a state of crisis. Recently, Li Jingji has clearly expressed his support for the 6 Great Temples reorganization at the Alliance Conference. He wants to end the loose alliance and unite them more closely to establish a united country. This is clearly a provocation to us. Doesn't he want to be the first leader of this new alliance? Yang Haohan said, Li Jingji is a person with strength, but his character is too gloomy and unyielding. Although he looks amiable on the surface, he is extremely arrogant in his bones. With his character, if he controls the new alliance, it won't be a good thing. But now I'm afraid it will be very difficult for us to stop him. Unless those seniors of the titled monster hunters make a move. Long Tianyin shook his head. That's impossible. Those seniors have already clearly stated that they will only appear as judges in this tournament. It is impossible for them to participate in the tournament. Li Jingji, humph, this old man wants to see how much he has improved in these 10 years. Whether he can get past me. As the saying goes, the old tiger's prestige is still there. As soon as these words came out, Long Tianyin's body immediately burst forth with a strong fighting spirit. Yang Haohan said, no matter who the final leader is, the establishment of the new alliance cannot be delayed. The Holy War 4 years ago brought us huge losses, but at the same time, it also let us see the light. If the alliance can have a unified voice and coordinate all resources, then, I believe it won't be long before we can launch a counterattack against the demons. Long Tianyin nodded and said, yesterday, I met with Xingyu. The Assassin Temple has expressed their support for us. As for the Warrior Temple, I have also greeted Qiu Yonghao, but they have always been on good terms with the Magic Temple. I don't think our chances are high. The Temple of the Priests has always been neutral. Now, the attitude of the Soul Temple is the most important. If they can also support us, then our chances will greatly increase. Yang Haohan said, in terms of supporters, I don't think we need to worry too much. After all, we have controlled the alliance for so many years. In terms of recognition, it won't be weaker than the Magic Temple. Now, the key is the results of the tournament. This is very important. Fighting against the demons, it is inevitable that we will clash with the Demon Emperor. After the establishment of the new alliance, strength will become the most important factor in determining the ownership of power. Li Jingji's talent is extraordinary, and he has been enduring all these years. In the temple tournament 10 years ago, he was obviously holding back. Obviously, he didn't have absolute confidence at that time. This time, however, he is much more high-profile. He is determined to win. Old dragon, you can't be careless. After all, Li Jingji is young. I think his internal spiritual energy has probably exceeded 200,000, or even higher. Long Tianyin said, no matter what, we have to try. It won't be that easy for him to defeat me. Yang Haohan said, in 3 days the temple tournament will begin. Let's go, I have to hurry for the elders of the Knights Templars to have a meeting and unify our thoughts. Yes. Long Tianyin nodded. The two powerhouses stood up at the same time and walked out. At this time, a sonorous voice came from outside. Reporting to leader, someone wants to see you. Yang Haohan frowned and said, who is it? He didn't say. He just asked me to pass something to you. The voice outside replied. Yang Haohan opened the door and walked out. Outside, a middle-aged knight in Mithril Foundation armor stood respectfully, holding a token in his hands. Long Tianyin waved his sleeves and the token flew towards them. Yang Haohan raised his hand and let the token fall into his hand. The two Knight of the Seal's eyes fell on the token at the same time. What shocked the Mithril Foundation Knight was that when the gazes of the two divine marked knights were focused on the token, their bodies trembled at the same time, and their expressions changed drastically. Instinctively looking at each other, Yang Haohan and Long Tianyin shouted at the Mithril Foundation Knight in unison, where is the person with the token? Temple League Headquarter, Magic Temple's quiet room. The short and plump Li Jingji sat quietly in the middle of the quiet room. A layer of faint green light enveloped his body steadily. The green light emitted an obvious metallic luster. It was clearly the appearance of the Ling Gang. Moreover, it looked completely like a solid light shield, without any illusory changes. After letting out a long breath, Li Jingji slowly opened his eyes. 2 rays of green light shot out from his eyes like lightning. They pierced straight into the Ling Gang in front of him. Ding! The light shield of the Ling Gang trembled slightly. In the next instant, it immediately turned into countless green light spots floating in the air. Li Jingji opened his mouth and took a deep breath. In an instant, all the green light spots were sucked into his body and disappeared. Reporting to Temple Master, the elders are all here. A respectful voice came from outside. Okay. Li Jingji responded. His body slowly floated up and landed on his feet. Then, he slowly walked out of the quiet room. A middle-aged man in a green robe waited quietly outside. When he saw Li Jingji coming out, he led the way. The Sanctuary Alliance headquarters was divided into 6 areas according to the different temple. Naturally, the Magic Temple had its own area. After passing through 2 corridors, the middle-aged mage led Li Jingji to a luxuriously decorated meeting room. Although the Magic Temple was inferior to the Knights Templars in terms of status, in terms of wealth, no temple in the entire Temple League could compare to the Magic Temple. Seeing Li Jingji's arrival, everyone in the meeting room stood up. Li Jingji's body moved slightly, and in the next moment, he was already at the seat at the front of the meeting room. At that moment, there were about 50 people in the entire meeting room. Although it was just a simple meeting room, if an outsider were to come here, he would be shocked to find that the concentration of magical elements in this meeting room was at least 10 times that of the outside world. Even a simple breath would cause a sticky feeling. Without a doubt, the strong magical elements were brought about by the people in the meeting room. More than 80% of the mages in the meeting room had white hair and beard. They had obviously been waiting for Li Jingji to preside over the meeting. From this, one could also see Li Jingji's status in the magic temple. When other temple held similar meetings, the temple master would usually not be the last to arrive. This was out of respect for the elders of the temple. Li Jingji was obviously the last to arrive. Apart from his own temperament, the most important thing was naturally his control over the magic temple. Li Jingji's gaze swept across everyone in the meeting room and said in a deep voice, "Elders, the temple tournament is about to begin. According to reliable sources, this time, the Knights Templars will be sending Long Tianyin. The Knights Templars have always supported the establishment of the new alliance. With our help this time, it is basically set in stone. I have always been against the establishment of a new alliance and the integration of the forces of the six temples. It is not that I do not see the advantages of the new alliance, but it is because the magic temple does not have the power to lead. However, the situation in this temple tournament is different.